Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The first call came in on a Tuesday night in early February, right around the time when the cold stops being something you complain about and starts being something you simply endure. I was running patrol along County Road 7, out past the Lindquist property and into that stretch of farmland that sits between the state forest and the old grain elevator. The heater in my cruiser had been acting up for a week, cycling between lukewarm and nothing at all, and I had my collar turned up and my coffee long since gone cold in the holder beside me. My name is Cal Reddick. I've been a deputy with the Candiotto County Sheriff's Department for 11 years now, working under Sheriff Harlan Crowley for the last 8 of those. In that time, I've responded to every kind of call you can imagine in rural Minnesota. Domestics that turn ugly, bar fights that spill into parking lots, snowmobile accidents, ice fishing mishaps, the occasional meth lab tucked into an abandoned barn. You see enough of that, you start to think you've seen it all. You start to think nothing can really surprise you anymore. I was wrong about that. The radio crackled just after 9:30. Dispatch coming through with that particular flatness that tells you somebody's trying very hard to sound professional about something that's got them unsettled. Domestic disturbance call, they said. Possible family violence. The address was 4412 County Road 7, which would have put it about 3 miles ahead of me, out where the farms get sparse and the tree lines crowd close to the road. I acknowledged the call and hit my lights, not the siren. Out here, sound carries in strange ways, especially in winter when the air is dense and still. I've learned that sometimes you want to announce yourself, and sometimes you want to arrive quiet. Give yourself a moment to assess before anyone knows you're there. The snow had been falling since noon, not heavy but steady, the kind that accumulates without you noticing until suddenly everything is buried. My headlights cut through the white curtain, and I watched the mailbox numbers climb as I drove. 4408, 4410, then nothing. Just empty fields stretching away on both sides, the fence posts barely visible beneath their caps of snow, and beyond them, the dark mass of the tree line like a wall at the edge of the world. I slowed, checked the address again. 4412 County Road 7. But there was no 4412. There was 4410, a small hobby farm with a light burning in the kitchen window, and then there was nothing until 4418, which was the Gunderson place, dark and shuttered for the winter, while they stayed with family down in the cities. I pulled onto the shoulder and radioed dispatch. Asked them to confirm the address. They came back after a minute, said the caller had definitely given 4412 County Road 7, said they'd heard a woman screaming in the background before the line went dead. Caller ID showed the number as blocked. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, watching the snow fall through my headlight beams. County Road 7 has been here since before my grandfather was born. I've driven it 1,000 times. There's never been a 44 or 12. But I got out anyway. That's the job. You don't ignore a domestic violence call just because the address doesn't make sense. You figure it out. The cold hit me like a physical thing when I stepped out of the cruiser. 20 below, maybe colder with the wind chill. The snow squeaked under my boots, that particular sound it makes when the temperature drops past a certain point. I walked along the road with my flashlight, checking for any sign of a driveway I might have missed, any structure set back from the road that wouldn't be visible from a passing car. That's when I found it. About 50 yards past the 4410 mailbox, Almost completely buried in snow and overgrown sumac, there was a driveway, or what had once been a driveway. The entrance was chained off with a rusted cable strung between two posts, and beyond it I could see the faint depression of a path winding back through the trees. No mailbox, no number, but the spacing was right. This would be where 4412 should have been. I called it in, told dispatch I was going to check it out on foot. They acknowledged, told me backup was 20 minutes away. In rural Minnesota, 20 minutes is close. I ducked under the chain and started up the driveway. My flashlight beam swept across undisturbed snow, and I mean undisturbed. No tire tracks, no footprints, nothing to suggest anyone had been down this path in weeks, maybe longer. The snow was smooth and perfect, like a fresh sheet pulled tight over a bed. The driveway curved through a stand of bare oaks, their branches black against the gray sky, creaking in the wind. I could feel the cold working into my fingers despite my gloves, into my face despite my collar, the kind of cold that finds every gap, every weakness in your defenses. Then I came around the curve and saw the house. It sat at the end of the driveway, a 2-story farmhouse that might have been white once but had gone gray with age and neglect. The windows were dark, some of them boarded over. The porch roof sagged in the middle, and one of the support posts had given way entirely, leaving that corner of the roof hanging at a broken angle. There was a barn behind the house, its doors hanging open, and what looked like a chicken coop that had collapsed in on itself. The place was abandoned. Had been abandoned for years, from the look of it. There was no way anyone had made a call from here. No way anyone was living here. But I saw the light. Just for a second, in one of the upper windows. A flicker of something, there and gone. Could have been a reflection from my flashlight, could have been nothing at all. But it made me pause. Made me stand there in the snow, staring up at that dark window, waiting to see if it would come again. It didn't. I keyed my radio, reported what I'd found. Dispatch acknowledged, told me backup was still 15 out. I could wait. That would be the smart thing. The by-the-book thing. Wait for backup, approach the structure together, clear it room by room. But the call had reported a woman screaming. If someone was in there, if someone was hurt, 15 minutes could be the difference between life and death. In this cold, it could be the difference even if they weren't hurt. I approached the house. The porch steps groaned under my weight. The wood soft with rot. I tested each one before committing my full weight, my breath pluming white in the beam of my flashlight. The front door was closed but not locked. When I pushed it open, it swung inward with a sound like a sigh. Inside, the darkness was total. My flashlight cut through it, revealing a hallway with peeling wallpaper and a staircase leading up. The floor was covered with debris. Fallen plaster, old newspapers, what looked like animal droppings. There was a smell too, faint but unmistakable. The sweet, rotten smell of something dead. I announced myself. "Sheriff's Department," I said. I called out, asked if anyone was there, if anyone needed help. My voice sounded flat and strange in the empty house, absorbed by the walls instead of echoing back. No response. I cleared the ground floor, room by room. Kitchen with a rusted stove and cabinets hanging open. Living room with a collapsed couch and a fireplace full of old ash. Back bedroom with a mattress on the floor stained with something dark. Every room was empty, every room was cold, and in every room that smell was a little stronger. I found the source in the back hallway. A raccoon, dead for weeks, curled up against the baseboard. Big one. Probably came in looking for shelter and couldn't get back out. I relaxed a little. That explained the smell, at least. But it didn't explain the call. I went upstairs. The steps creaked with every footfall, loud in the silence. I kept my flashlight up, my other hand on my sidearm. The upstairs hallway was narrow, with 3 doors leading off it. 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. I cleared them one by one. Empty. All of them empty. But in the second bedroom, the one at the front of the house with the window I'd been watching from the driveway, I found something. A telephone. It sat on the floor in the corner of the room, an old rotary model, the kind with a cord that connects to a wall jack. The cord was still attached, trailing across the floor and up the wall to a jack near the baseboard. I stood there looking at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The house had been abandoned for years. There was no power, no heat, no sign of habitation. There was no way this phone could be connected to anything. I reached down and picked up the receiver. There was a dial tone. I dropped it like it had burned me, stepped back fast, heart hammering in my chest. That's not possible, I was thinking. That's not possible. The house doesn't have power. The phone line would have been disconnected years ago, but I had heard it, clear as anything. A dial tone. I was still standing there, still staring at the phone, when it rang. The sound was enormous in the empty room, shrill and insistent, and I jerked back another step, almost tripped over my own feet. It rang again and again, and I knew I should answer it. Knew that was why I was here, to respond to the call. But I couldn't make myself reach for it. I couldn't make myself pick up that receiver again. It stopped after the 5th ring. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I left the house. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I walked back down those stairs and out through that front door, and I didn't stop until I was back at my cruiser, back in the warmth and the light with the radio chatter and the familiar smell of old coffee. I sat there breathing hard, watching the snow fall, waiting for backup to arrive. When Deputy Laurel Vexler got there 12 minutes later, I told her what I'd found. She's a good cop, Laurel. 5 years with the department, steady and smart, not prone to flights of imagination. She listened to my report without interrupting, then asked if I wanted to go back in with her as backup. I said yes. What else was I going to say? We cleared the house again, together this time, room by room, top to bottom. The phone was still there in the upstairs bedroom, still connected to the wall. But when I picked up the receiver this time, there was nothing. No dial tone, no sound at all. Just dead plastic against my ear. Laurel checked the wall jack. The wires were cut, she said. Had been cut for a long time, from the look of the corrosion on the copper. The phone wasn't connected to anything. I didn't know what to tell her. I didn't know what to tell myself. I had heard the dial tone. I had heard the phone ring. But the evidence in front of me said that was impossible. We filed our reports and went back on patrol. The call was logged as unfounded. Address non-existent. Probably a prank. That happens sometimes. Kids get hold of a phone, make fake emergency calls for a thrill. Usually you can trace it back, give their parents a talking to, and that's the end of it. But this one couldn't be traced. The number was blocked. The address didn't exist. And 2 nights later, it happened again. The second call came in at 10:47 p.m. on Thursday. Same thing. Domestic disturbance. 4412 County Road 7. Sounds of a woman in distress. This time, the dispatcher noted that she could hear something in the background before the line went dead. She described it as a woman crying or maybe trying to speak, but unable to form words. Choking, maybe, she said, like someone was choking. I took the call again. I was in the area again, running the same patrol route I always ran on Thursday nights. Looking back, I wonder if that was coincidence. I wonder if whoever or whatever was making these calls knew my schedule, knew where I would be and when. I didn't go to the house alone this time. I waited for Laurel, and we went in together, cleared it room by room again. Found nothing. The phone was still there, still disconnected. No dial tone, no ring. Just an old piece of equipment in an empty house. But when we came back outside, something was different. There were footprints in the snow. They came from the direction of the barn, crossed the open ground between the outbuildings and the house, climbed the porch steps, and stopped at the front door. Just stopped, like whoever made them had walked right through the wall. And here's the thing that still bothers me, months later. The footprints weren't there when we went in. We had approached from the driveway, come up the porch steps. The snow on those steps had been undisturbed. I remember because I noticed it, remembered how it had been the same way the first night. No prints, no tracks, nothing. But now there were prints on the steps, leading up to the door, from inside, somehow. But we had just cleared the house. There was no one in there. Laurel and I stood on the porch, staring at those prints, neither of us saying anything. The snow was still falling, already starting to fill them in, erasing the evidence of whatever had made them. They were boot prints, it looked like. Work boots, maybe. Big, like a man's. But there were no prints leading away from the house, only toward it, only up to that door, and then nothing. I followed the trail back toward the barn. Laurel stayed on the porch, watching the house, her hand on her weapon. The prints led through the open barn doors into the darkness inside. I swept my flashlight across the interior. Old hay bales, rusted equipment, a tractor that looked like it hadn't run since the 70s. And in the back corner, half hidden behind a collapsed stall, I found where the prints began. They came out of the wall. That's the only way I can describe it. The barn had a concrete foundation, and there in the corner was a section of wall that was just concrete block, solid and unbroken. But the footprints started right at the base of that wall, like someone had walked through it, or out of it. I put my hand on the concrete. It was cold, solid, exactly what it appeared to be. A wall, an impassable barrier, but something had come through it. We called it in, requested a detective. Sheriff Crowley himself came out, which tells you how seriously he was taking this. Harlan is old school, 30 years in law enforcement, not given to fanciful explanations for anything. He looked at the footprints, looked at the wall, looked at me with those hard gray eyes of his. "What am I supposed to make of this, Cal?" he asked. I told him I didn't know. I told him about the phone call, about the dial tone I'd heard on my first visit, about the phone that couldn't possibly work but had rung anyway. He listened without interrupting, the way he always does. And when I was finished, he stood there for a long moment, looking at the farmhouse, at the barn, at the snow still falling through the darkness. "I know this property," he said finally. "The Erickson place. Family lived here for 3 generations. Then the last of them died off about 15 years ago. Son and his wife, car accident on the interstate. No children, no heirs. County took the land for back taxes, but nobody wanted to buy it. It's just been sitting here ever since." He paused, still looking at the house. "There were stories about this place," he said. "Back when I was first starting out. Domestic calls, people reporting screams from the property. But the family always denied it. Said everything was fine. Said we must have been hearing things." He turned to face me, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Something that might have been unease. "Let's keep this quiet for now," he said. "No need to start rumors. I'll pull the old case files, see what we've got on record. You keep running your patrol, but stay away from this property unless you get another call. And if you do get another call, you wait for backup. You don't go in alone." I said, "Yes, sir." What else was I going to say? 3 nights passed. No calls. I drove past the property on my regular patrol, slowing down each time, looking up that overgrown driveway for any sign of light, any sign of movement. There was nothing, just the snow and the darkness and the skeletal trees. On the 4th night, I was in the office doing paperwork when Harlan called me in. He had the old case files spread out on his desk, manila folders gone yellow with age, papers covered in typewritten text and faded handwriting. He didn't say anything, just gestured for me to sit down and read. The Erickson family had lived on that property since 1934. The original homesteaders were Scandinavian immigrants, a husband and wife who built the farmhouse and worked the land for 30 years before passing it on to their son. That son raised his own family there, and his son after him, 4 generations in the same house before the line ended in 1987 with the car accident that killed the last 2. But the family had a history. The files documented call after call over the decades, going all the way back to 1952. Domestic disturbances, reports of screaming, welfare checks requested by concerned neighbors. And every time, the deputies who responded found nothing. The family always said everything was fine. No evidence of violence, no one willing to press charges, no grounds for further investigation. Except that the calls kept coming. Year after year, decade after decade. Always the same. A woman screaming. Sounds of distress, and then nothing. There was one name that appeared over and over in the files. Ingrid Erickson. Wife of the 2nd generation, mother of the 3rd. She had married into the family in 1949, and the first domestic call was logged in 1952. After that, her name appeared in report after report, always as the assumed victim, never as a complainant. She never called the police herself. It was always neighbors, always someone else who heard the screaming and decided to report it. Ingrid Erickson died in 1971. The death certificate said heart failure. She was 43 years old. But here's the thing. The calls didn't stop when she died. They kept coming, all through the 70s and into the 80s. Different voices, same reports. Woman screaming. Sounds of violence. And always from the property at 4412 County Road 7, the address that didn't exist anymore because the county had removed the mailbox when they took the land. How is that possible? I asked Harlan. If she died in 71, who was calling after that? He shook his head. I don't know. But there's something else. He pushed one of the folders toward me. It was newer than the others, the paper still white, the type crisp and clear. A report from 2003, 12 years after the property had been abandoned. A deputy responding to yet another domestic disturbance call at 4412 County Road 7. He had found the house empty, just like I had. But he had noted something in his report, something that made my blood go cold. Observed female figure in upstairs window upon arrival. Figure appeared to be watching approaching vehicle. Upon entering structure, found no occupants. Searched entire premises, found no evidence of recent habitation. I looked up at Harlan. He saw her, I said. Harlan nodded slowly. He saw something. But when he went inside, there was nobody there. I thought about the light I had seen in the upstairs window that first night. The flicker that had been there and gone so fast I couldn't be sure I had really seen it. I thought about the phone that had been disconnected for years, but still somehow rang. I thought about the footprints that came out of a solid concrete wall and led to a door, but not away from it. "What's happening out there?" I asked. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't know, but I think we need to find out." We started with the county records, birth certificates, death certificates, property transfers, anything that might tell us more about the Erickson family and what had happened on that farm. What we found was both more and less than I expected. The family had been unremarkable for most of their history. Farmers, like everyone else out here. They kept to themselves, attended church on Sundays, contributed to community events when asked. No criminal records, no civil disputes, no red flags of any kind. Just a normal family living a normal life on a normal piece of land. Until Ingrid. She came from a family in Sweden, immigrated to Minnesota in 1947 at the age of 19. 2 years later, she married Eric Erickson, the son of the farm's second owners. It should have been a typical immigrant success story. New country, new husband, new life. But something had gone wrong. The domestic calls started 3 years after her marriage and continued until her death 19 years later. 19 years of someone calling the police to report a woman screaming. 19 years of deputies finding nothing, noting nothing, doing nothing. And then she was dead at 43, and whatever had happened to her was buried along with her in the Lutheran cemetery at the edge of town. I pulled her death certificate. Heart failure, like I said. But the coroner's notes told a different story. They described old fractures that had healed improperly, scarring on her lungs consistent with repeated respiratory trauma, signs of long-term malnutrition. The coroner had written a single sentence at the bottom of his report, separate from the official findings. This woman suffered greatly in her life, but he hadn't reported it, hadn't opened an investigation, hadn't notified authorities. 1971 was a different time. What happened between a husband and wife was their own business, even if that business was killing her slowly, year by year, behind the closed doors of a farmhouse that nobody could see from the road. I drove out to the cemetery on a Sunday afternoon. I'm not sure what I was hoping to find. Answers, maybe. Closure. Some kind of explanation for what was happening at that house. Instead, I found her grave. Ingrid Erickson, 1928 to 1971. Beloved wife and mother. There were flowers on the stone. Fresh ones. Bright red carnations that stood out against the snow like drops of blood. I looked around the cemetery, but there was no one else there. No cars in the small lot, no footprints in the snow except my own. Just the graves and the bare trees and the wind cutting across the open ground. Someone had been there. Someone was still remembering her, still bringing flowers to her grave more than 50 years after her death. But who? The family line had ended. There was no one left. I took a photo of the flowers and went back to the station. That night, the call came again. Same address, same report. Woman screaming, sounds of violence, then the line going dead. I was off duty, home in my apartment. 2 beers into a quiet evening when my phone rang and Harlan's voice told me to get to the property as fast as I could. "Something's different this time," he said. "Dispatch is still on the line with the caller. They haven't hung up." I made it to County Road 7 in 12 minutes, breaking every speed limit between my apartment and the edge of town. Harlan was already there, and Laurel and 2 other deputies I didn't recognize in the dark. We gathered at the end of the driveway, engines running, lights flashing, and dispatch patched us into the call. At first there was nothing, just dead air, the faint hiss of an open line. Then, underneath it, so quiet I almost thought I was imagining it, a sound. Breathing. Ragged, hitching breathing, like someone trying not to cry. "Hello," I said into my radio, knowing the dispatcher would relay it through the line. "This is the Candiothe County Sheriff's Department. Can you tell us your name? Can you tell us where you are?" The breathing continued. In and out, in and out. And then, so faint I had to strain to hear it, a voice. "Help me," a woman's voice. Thin, exhausted, barely above a whisper. "We're here," I said. "We're right outside. Can you come to the door? Can you tell us where you are in the house? He won't let me." The words came through clearly, each one distinct despite the whisper. "He won't let me." And then, after a pause, "He never lets me." The line went dead. We went in, all 5 of us, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the darkness. We cleared the ground floor in under a minute, moving fast and tight, calling out as we went. "Sheriff's Department," we kept saying. "We're here to help." But the house was empty, room after room after room. No one hiding in the closets, no one crouched behind the furniture, no one at all. Upstairs, Harlan took point, the rest of us falling in behind him. The stairs creaked under our weight, the sound enormous in the silence. The hallway at the top was dark, the doors to the bedrooms all closed. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel it in my throat. The first bedroom was empty. The second bedroom was empty. The bathroom was empty. The third bedroom, the one at the front of the house, the one with the window I kept watching, had its door closed. But there was light coming from underneath it, a flickering yellow light like a candle burning. Harlan looked at me. I nodded. He tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back and kicked it in. The door flew open and we went through fast, sweeping the room with our flashlights and our weapons. It was empty. Like every other room in the house, it was empty. But there were candles burning, 6 of them arranged in a circle on the floor. And in the center of the circle was the telephone, receiver off the hook, lying on its side. And on the wall above it, written in something dark and reddish-brown that I really hoped wasn't what it looked like, a single word. Ingrid. We stood there, the 5 of us staring at that word on the wall. The candles flickered in some draft I couldn't feel, throwing shadows across the peeling wallpaper. The telephone receiver lay silent in the middle of its circle, the cord trailing away to the wall jack. "Who lit these candles?" Laurel asked. Her voice was very quiet. No one answered. There was no answer to give. We had cleared the house in under 3 minutes. There was no way anyone had been up here ahead of us. No way anyone could have gotten out without us seeing them. But someone had lit those candles. Someone had written that name on the wall. Someone had been on the phone with the dispatch for nearly 10 minutes, whispering, breathing, begging for help. I walked over to the telephone, knelt down beside it. I could see now that the cord was still cut, the ends still corroded, just like it had been every other time I'd been in this house. The phone was still disconnected. It couldn't make calls, it couldn't receive them. But someone had been talking through it anyway. I reached out and picked up the receiver. I don't know what I expected. A dial tone, a voice, some kind of answer. What I got was silence, just dead plastic and the smell of old dust. "Cal." Harlan's voice sharp and urgent. I looked up. He was standing at the window, the one that faced the driveway, the one I'd seen the light in that first night. He was looking down at something outside. I crossed to stand beside him. There was a woman in the yard. She was standing in the snow between the house and the barn, perfectly still, looking up at us. She wore a light dress, nothing that could have kept her warm in this cold, and her feet were bare. Her hair was long and dark and hung loose around her shoulders. I couldn't make out her features from this distance, but I could see that she was looking at us, looking right at us, at the window where we stood. "Hey!" I shouted. I don't know why I shouted. She couldn't hear me through the glass. But I shouted anyway, and then I was moving, running for the door, taking the stairs 2 at a time, bursting out through the front door into the frozen night. The yard was empty. I stood on the porch, breath pluming white, scanning the snow for any sign of her. Footprints, tracks, anything. But there was nothing. The snow was smooth and unbroken, just like it had been every other time, just like it always was. "She was there," I said. Harlan had followed me out, and the others behind him. "I saw her. She was standing right there. We all saw her," Harlan said. "Then where is she? Where are her footprints?" He didn't answer. None of us did. We stood there on that rotten porch in that bitter cold, and we looked at the empty yard where a woman had been standing, looking up at us with eyes I couldn't see from a distance but somehow still felt. And I knew in that moment that we were looking for someone who wasn't there anymore. Someone who had stopped being there a long time ago. Someone who had screamed for help for 19 years while nobody listened, and then had died in this house of heart failure at 43 years old. Someone who was still screaming. We pulled the records on Ingrid Eriksson's death. The original ones, the full file from 1971, not just the death certificate summary. It took some digging. Files that old aren't always where they're supposed to be, and some of them have gone missing entirely over the years. But Harlan has contacts at the state level, people who owe him favors, and after a few days he came up with what we were looking for. Ingrid had died on February 7th, 1971, a Tuesday night. She was found by her husband the following morning, lying on the floor of the upstairs bedroom. The bedroom at the front of the house, the one with the window. The coroner ruled it heart failure based on a brief examination at the scene. There was no autopsy. The family didn't want one, and in 1971, in a rural county, that was enough. The body was buried 3 days later, and that was the end of it. Except it wasn't. Because, buried in the file, in the notes from the deputy who had responded to the husband's call that morning, was a detail that no one had followed up on at the time. A detail that made everything else fall into place. There had been a phone call that night. A neighbor, 2 miles down the road, had called the sheriff's department at 10:52 p.m. on February 7th to report screaming coming from the Eriksson property. The deputy on duty had logged the call and driven out to investigate. He arrived at the house at 11:14 p.m., spoke briefly with Eric Eriksson at the door, and was told everything was fine. His wife had a nightmare, the husband said. She gets them sometimes. Nothing to worry about. The deputy noted that he could hear movement upstairs during this conversation. A woman's voice, muffled. He asked if he could speak with Mrs. Eriksson directly. The husband said she was upset and didn't want to see anyone. She just needs to rest, he said. She'll be fine in the morning. The deputy left. 8 hours later, Ingrid Eriksson was dead. I read that report 3 times sitting in Harlan's office with the file spread out in front of me. I read the deputy's notes about the muffled voice upstairs, about the husband blocking the doorway, about the decision to leave without laying eyes on the woman who had supposedly been screaming. And I thought about all the other calls over all those years, all the other reports of screaming, all the other times deputies had gone out there and found nothing, noted nothing, done nothing. She was calling for help, I said. For 19 years, she was calling for help. Harlan nodded slowly. And the night she died, someone actually called it in. Someone heard her screaming, and they called us, and we went out there. We were right there, and he sent us away. Yes, and then he killed her. Harlan didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew what had happened in that house on February 7th, 1971. We both knew what had been happening there for years before that, and what the end had looked like when it finally came. We can't prove it, Harlan said finally. It's been more than 50 years. He's dead. Everyone involved is dead. There's nothing to prosecute, no one to hold accountable. So that's it, I said. We just close the file? He looked at me for a long moment, then he said, No, we don't close the file. We figure out what's still happening out there. We figure out why, after all this time, she's still calling for help. I've thought a lot about that question in the weeks since. Why now? Why, 53 years after Ingrid Eriksson died in that house, are the calls starting again? Why is she reaching out to us, appearing in windows, writing her name on walls? I don't have answers. Not really. But I have a theory. In February of this year, the county finally processed the sale of the Erickson property. After sitting vacant for more than 3 decades, it was purchased by a developer from the cities who plans to tear down the old farmhouse and build a small subdivision of vacation homes. The deal closed on February 2nd. 5 days later, on February 7th, the anniversary of Ingrid's death, the first call came in. She knows they're going to tear it down. She knows her story is going to be buried along with the house, and no one is ever going to know what happened to her. No one is ever going to know her name, so she's telling us. The calls have continued. 2 or 3 times a week now, always the same. Domestic disturbance. 4412 County Road 7, a woman in distress. We've stopped responding in force. There's no point. The house is always empty, always has been, always will be. There's no one to rescue, no one to arrest, no crime to solve. But I go out there anyway. I go alone after my shift, when the roads are quiet and the snow has stopped falling. I park at the end of the driveway and walk up to the house, and I stand in that upstairs bedroom with its peeling wallpaper and its candles burned down to nothing, and the name still faintly visible on the wall. And I talk to her. I tell her I know what happened. I tell her I'm sorry no one listened. Sorry no one helped. Sorry she died alone in this room, while her husband told the deputy at the door that everything was fine. I tell her that her name is in our files now, that people know her story, that she isn't forgotten. I don't know if she hears me. I don't know if any of this means anything to her, wherever she is, whatever she's become. But the calls have been less frequent lately, and the last time I was out there I found something on the floor of that bedroom. A red carnation. Fresh, bright red, lying on the dusty floorboards like someone had just set it down. No footprints in the dust around it, no sign of how it had gotten there. Just the flower. The same kind that someone has been leaving on her grave all these years. I left it where I found it. It seemed like the right thing to do. The development project is scheduled to begin in April. The farmhouse will come down, and the barn, and whatever is left of the outbuildings. They'll grade the land and pour new foundations and build new structures. And in a year or 2, there will be families living there, children playing in yards where the house used to stand. None of them will know the history. None of them will know her name. But I'll know. And Harlan will know, and Laurel, and the others who responded to those calls and saw what we saw. We'll know that Ingrid Erickson lived and suffered and died on that land, and that for 53 years after her death she kept calling for help, kept trying to tell someone what had happened to her. And finally, someone listened. I was on patrol last Tuesday night, running my usual route along County Road 7, when the radio crackled with a call. Domestic disturbance, the dispatcher said. 4412 County Road 7. I acknowledged and drove to the property, walked up the driveway through the snow, climbed the porch steps, went inside. The house was quiet. No candles burning, no writing on the walls. Just empty rooms and old dust and the smell of a place that's been closed up too long. I went upstairs to the bedroom. The phone was there, lying on its side in the corner, cord still cut, still disconnected. But when I picked up the receiver, just to check, just to see, I heard something. Not a dial tone, not a voice, just 2 words, so faint I might have imagined them. Thank you. Then silence. I hung up the phone and left the house, walked back down the driveway, got in my cruiser, drove away. I haven't been back since. I don't think I need to be. The calls have stopped. I don't know how to explain what happened at that farmhouse. I don't know how a woman dead for 53 years made phone calls and lit candles and wrote her name on walls. I don't know how she appeared in windows and left footprints in snow and spoke through a telephone that wasn't connected to anything. Those things aren't possible. They don't happen. But they happened. And I think, in the end, all she wanted was for someone to know. To know her name, to know her story, to know that she had lived and suffered and deserved better than she got. To know that she mattered. They say Lake Superior never gives up her dead. The old-timers around here will tell you stories about ships that went down 100 years ago and were never found, about bodies that sank into that black water and stayed there forever, preserved by the cold like specimens in a jar. But Canoe Birch Lake isn't Lake Superior. Canoe Birch is just a small glacial lake up in the Boundary Waters, maybe 3 miles long and a mile across at its widest point, fed by snowmelt and ringed by tamarack and black spruce. There's no reason the lake shouldn't give up what goes into it. But it doesn't. My name is Mason Kettering. I've been a deputy with the Cook County Sheriff's Department for 9 years, working out of Grand Marais on the North Shore. It's beautiful country up here, the kind of place people drive hundreds of miles to see. The forests and the lakes, the rocky coastline, the northern lights in winter. But it's harsh country too. The winters are brutal, the wilderness is unforgiving, and the lakes can kill you in minutes if you don't respect them. The call came in on a Thursday afternoon in late January, right in the teeth of the worst cold snap we'd had in years. 40 below with the wind chill, the kind of cold where your eyelashes freeze together and your breath turns to ice crystals before it leaves your mouth. A woman in Grand Marais reported her husband missing. He had gone ice fishing on Canoe Birch Lake 2 days earlier and hadn't come home. His name was Dennis Varga, 53 years old, a machinist at the paper mill in Duluth. He'd been coming up to fish Canoe Birch for 20 years, knew the lake as well as anyone, had a permanent ice house out there that he'd built himself. He was an experienced outdoorsman, careful and methodical. Not the type to take stupid risks, but the lake was dangerous that week. We'd had a warm spell in early January followed by a hard freeze, and the ice was unpredictable. Thick in some places, thin in others, with pressure ridges and open leads that could swallow a snowmobile whole. The DNR had put out advisories warning people to stay off the lakes. Dennis Varga had gone anyway. I drove up to Canoe Birch with Deputy Sanderson to do an initial assessment. The access road was barely passable, drifted over with snow, and it took us nearly an hour to cover the 8 miles from the highway. When we finally reached the landing, we found Varga's truck parked at the edge of the ice, cold and silent, with 2 inches of snow on the windshield. The ice house was about half a mile out, a dark shape against the white expanse of the frozen lake. We geared up and started walking, testing the ice ahead of us with spud bars, watching for any sign of weakness or open water. The wind was savage, cutting through our gear like it wasn't there, driving needles of ice into any exposed skin. By the time we reached the ice house, I couldn't feel my face. The door was unlocked. Inside, we found all the signs of recent occupation. A propane heater, still with fuel. A cooler with food and beer. Fishing equipment laid out neat and ready, but no Dennis Varga. His holes were still open, the water in them frozen over but not as thick as the surrounding ice. His auger was leaning against the wall. His tip-ups were set and baited, the flags down. Everything suggested he had been here, had been fishing, had set up for a day on the ice. And then what? We searched the immediate area around the ice house, looking for any sign of where he might have gone. That's when we found the footprints. They led away from the ice house toward the center of the lake, a single set of boot prints in the crusty snow. I followed them with my eyes as far as I could, watching the trail extend across that white emptiness until it disappeared into the blowing snow. There was no sign of a return trail. He had walked out there and not walked back. We followed the prints. It was slow going, testing the ice every few steps, watching for any sign of discoloration or cracking that might indicate weak spots. The wind erased everything in front of us almost as fast as we could follow, filling in the prints, smoothing out the snow. But we kept on, following that single trail toward the center of the lake. After about a quarter mile, the prints stopped. Not gradually, not like he had turned around or veered off in another direction. They just stopped. One last clear boot print, pressed into the snow, and then nothing. Smooth, unbroken white in every direction. Sanderson and I stood there looking at that last footprint, looking at each other. The wind howled around us, driving snow into our faces, making it hard to see, hard to think. I knelt down and examined the ice. It was solid, 18 inches thick at least, no sign of cracking, no indication that it had broken and refrozen. This wasn't where someone had fallen through, so where was he? I looked around. The lake stretched out around us, featureless and white, the shoreline just a dark smudge in the distance. The sky was gray and low, full of snow. The wind never stopped. And then I heard it. The radio. It crackled to life in my coat pocket, a burst of static that made me jump. I pulled it out, thinking it was dispatch, but the voice that came through wasn't any voice I recognized. "You're going the wrong way." That's all it said. 5 words, clear and distinct, spoken by a man. Then silence. I keyed the radio. "Dispatch, did you just transmit?" "Negative," came the reply. "We didn't transmit. What did you hear?" I looked at Sanderson. His face was blank, impossible to read behind his balaclava, but I could see his eyes. "Someone just came through on the radio," I said. A male voice said we're going the wrong way. Sanderson shook his head. He hadn't heard anything. His radio had been silent. I stood there in the wind, holding my radio, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The voice had been clear. I hadn't imagined it. But Sanderson's radio hadn't picked it up, and dispatch hadn't transmitted. "You're going the wrong way." Wrong way from what? Toward what? I looked back the way we'd come, toward the ice house and the shore. Then I looked ahead, toward the center of the lake where the footprints had been leading. There was nothing there. Just ice and snow and wind. But the voice had said we were going the wrong way. "Let's head back," I told Sanderson. "We need to organize a proper search. Get more people out here." We returned to the ice house, then to the landing, then back to town. I filed my report and briefed the sheriff. A search was organized for the following morning, weather permitting. DNR, search and rescue volunteers, everyone we could get. Dennis Varga had been missing for 3 days now. If he was out there somewhere, injured, exposed to these temperatures, he didn't have much time left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about those footprints. Thinking about how they had just stopped, out there in the middle of the lake, with no sign of where he had gone. Thinking about the voice on the radio. "You're going the wrong way." I got up around midnight and sat at my kitchen table with a map of Canoe Birch Lake. Traced the route from the landing to the ice house to the place where the footprints had ended. It was almost exactly the geographic center of the lake. I thought about that for a while. Then I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Canoe Birch Lake. Missing persons. Disappearances. Drownings. I found more than I expected. Over the past 40 years, 7 people had gone missing on Canoe Birch Lake. Not all at once. Not even close together. Spread out over 4 decades, different seasons, different circumstances. But all of them had vanished on the lake, and none of them had ever been found. No bodies, no equipment, no sign of what had happened to them. Just gone. 7 people. Small numbers for a lake that saw hundreds of visitors every year. Easy to dismiss as accidents, bad luck, the inevitable toll of wilderness recreation. But 7 people with one thing in common. They had all disappeared in the same part of the lake. The center. The same area where Dennis Varga's footprints had led and then stopped. I sat back in my chair, looking at the map, at the cluster of X's I had marked. 7 disappearances over 40 years, all in the same spot. That wasn't coincidence. That was a pattern. And we were going back out there in the morning. The search team assembled at the Canoe Birch landing at first light. 23 people in all. Sheriff's deputies, DNR conservation officers, search and rescue volunteers from 3 different organizations. We had snowmobiles, ice augers, sonar equipment, even a drone. Everything we needed to search the lake systematically and thoroughly. The weather had improved overnight. Still cold, still below zero, but the wind had died down and the sky was clear for the first time in a week. Good conditions for a search. We might actually be able to see what we were looking for. I briefed the team on what we'd found the day before. The ice house with its signs of recent occupation. The footprints leading toward the center of the lake, the place where they stopped for no apparent reason. I didn't mention the voice on the radio. I didn't know how to explain that, and I wasn't sure it would help anyone find Dennis Varga. But I did mention the historical disappearances. The 7 people who had vanished in the same general area over the past 4 decades. That got people's attention. A few of the older volunteers nodded, like they knew what I was talking about, like they'd heard the stories even if they hadn't known the specifics. One of them was Jonah Waymeyer, 63 years old, retired Forest Service, been volunteering with search and rescue for longer than I'd been alive. He found me after the briefing, pulled me aside. "You know about the lake," he said. It wasn't a question. I know people have disappeared out there. I know they've never been found. He nodded slowly. My father used to tell me about it when I was young. Said there was something wrong with the water out there. Something in the lake that didn't want to let go. I waited for him to explain, but he didn't. Just looked at me with those pale blue eyes, then walked away to join his team. We spread out across the ice in a search pattern, working from the ice house toward the center of the lake. The teams on snowmobiles covered the outer areas while those of us on foot worked the central zone, the area where Varga's footprints had led. We moved in a grid, methodical and slow, checking every depression, every drift, every shadow that might indicate a hole in the ice or a body beneath the snow. By noon, we'd covered about a third of the lake and found nothing. I was working with a team of 3, including Elsie Brandt, the town clerk from Grand Marais who volunteered with search and rescue on weekends. She was in her 50s, practical and no nonsense, the kind of person who didn't waste words on anything that didn't need saying. We'd been walking in silence for the better part of an hour when she spoke up. "The ice is talking," she said. I stopped and listened. At first, I didn't hear anything. Then, underneath the silence, a sound. Low, deep, resonant. A groaning, creaking sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ice shifting, contracting in the cold, pressure building and releasing in waves across the frozen surface. "Just the ice settling," I said. "Normal for temperatures like this." Elsie didn't respond, but I noticed she was looking out toward the center of the lake, toward the area we hadn't searched yet, and there was something in her expression that I couldn't quite read. We kept moving. Around 2 o'clock, one of the snowmobile teams radioed in. They'd found something on the eastern shore. A glove half buried in the snow near the tree line. It was the right size and color to be Varga's. I headed over with 2 other searchers to check it out. The glove was ordinary, nothing special. Black leather, insulated. The kind you could buy at any outdoor store. It was frozen stiff, crusted with ice, but otherwise intact. No sign of damage, no indication of how it had ended up there. I looked around. The shore in this area was rocky, studded with boulders that poked up through the ice where the lake was shallow. The tree line came almost down to the water, black spruce and tamarack pressing close, their branches heavy with snow. If the glove was Varga's, what was it doing here? His ice house was on the other side of the lake. His footprints had led toward the center, not the eastern shore. How had his glove ended up half a mile away from where he'd been? I was standing there trying to work it out when my radio crackled. Static at first, the same burst of noise I'd heard the day before. Then the voice. "You're still going the wrong way." I grabbed the radio. "Who is this? Identify yourself." Silence. I looked at the others, 2 search and rescue volunteers, both watching me with puzzled expressions. "Did you hear that?" I asked. They shook their heads. They hadn't heard anything. I stood there on the ice, holding the radio, feeling the cold work into my bones. The same voice, the same message. "You're going the wrong way." But wrong way from what? We were searching for a missing person. There was no wrong way. You searched everywhere until you found something. Unless we were looking in the wrong place entirely. Unless what we were looking for wasn't where we thought it was. I keyed the radio, tried to reach whoever had transmitted. Nothing. Just dead air. "We're going back to the center," I told the others. "That's where his trail led. That's where we need to be looking." We returned to the main search area, the spot where Varga's footprints had stopped. By now, any remaining trace of the prints had been erased by wind and the passage of searchers, but I knew where it was, right in the middle of the lake, about equidistant from all shores, the place where 7 other people had disappeared over 40 years. I had the team bring the sonar equipment. If Varga had gone through the ice, if he was in the water, the sonar would find him. It was the only explanation that made sense. He had walked out here, hit a weak spot, gone through. The ice had refrozen over him, erasing any evidence. We set up the equipment and started scanning. Nothing. The sonar showed the lake bottom clearly. Mud and rock, submerged logs, the ghostly shapes of sunken trees, but no body, no equipment. Nothing that shouldn't be there. We scanned a wider area. Same result. We scanned the entire center section of the lake, every square foot of it. Nothing. Dennis Varga wasn't in the water. So where was he? The sun was getting low by the time we finished, the temperature dropping as the light faded. We had maybe an hour before we'd have to call off the search for the night. Retreat to town, come back in the morning to do it all over again. I was standing there staring at the ice, trying to think of something we'd missed, when Jonah Waymeyer came up beside me. "You won't find him," he said. His voice was quiet, matter of fact. "They never find anyone out here." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" My father told me the stories. His father told him. The lake takes people, has been taking them since before anyone kept records. You can search all you want, but you won't find them. The lake doesn't give them back. "That's just talk," I said. "Stories. There has to be an explanation." You heard the voice on the radio. It wasn't a question, he knew. Somehow he knew. I didn't answer. My father heard it too, Wehmeyer said. Back in '68. He was part of a search party, looking for a trapper who'd gone missing out here. They never found the man, but my father heard a voice on the radio, telling them they were going the wrong way. "What does it mean?" I asked. "Wrong way toward what?" Wehmeyer was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe it's not about direction. Maybe it's about something else. Maybe we're searching for the wrong thing." I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know what he meant. But that night, lying in bed again, staring at the ceiling again, I thought about his words. Searching for the wrong thing. What did that mean? We were searching for a missing man. That was the right thing to search for. Unless it wasn't. unless what we needed to find wasn't Dennis Varga at all. The search continued for 3 more days. We covered every inch of Canoe Birch Lake, every cove, every shoreline, every section of ice. We brought in divers to check the areas the sonar might have missed. We brought in dogs to search the surrounding forest. We interviewed everyone who had been on the lake in the weeks before Varga's disappearance, looking for any information that might tell us where he had gone. We found nothing. By the 4th day, the search was officially suspended. Not called off, just suspended. We would continue to monitor the area, check back periodically, follow up on any new information. But the active search was over. Dennis Varga was missing and presumed dead, cause unknown, remains unrecovered. I couldn't let it go. Something about this case had gotten under my skin in a way cases usually didn't. The footprints that led nowhere, the voice on the radio, the pattern of disappearances going back 40 years. None of it made sense, and I couldn't stop trying to make it make sense. I started digging into the old cases, the 7 people who had disappeared on Canoe Birch Lake before Dennis Varga. I pulled the files, read the reports, talked to anyone who remembered anything. Most of the cases were decades old, the witnesses dead or moved away, the records incomplete, but I found enough. The first recorded disappearance was in 1961. A fur trapper named Gus Lindquist worked the area every winter for 20 years. His sled was found on the ice in the center of the lake, dogs still hitched, no sign of Lindquist. Search parties found nothing. Case closed. The second was in 1968. That was the one Wemeyer's father had been involved in. Another trapper, similar circumstances. Equipment found on the ice, man gone. Search parties found nothing. Case closed. The third was in 1974, then 1983, then 91, then 2004, then 2011. Different people, different circumstances, but always the same outcome. Someone went out on Canoe Birch Lake and didn't come back. Search parties found nothing, and now Dennis Varga made 8. I was in the office late one night going through the files again when I noticed something I'd missed before. The 91 case, a woman named Patricia Holloway, ice fishing like Varga. Her report included a note from the search coordinator, someone I didn't recognize, probably retired or dead by now. The note described something the coordinator had experienced during the search. Radio transmission received at 14:32 hours, the note read. Male voice stating search team was going the wrong way. Transmission could not be traced or identified. Other team members did not report hearing the transmission. The same thing that had happened to me. I kept reading. Recommend investigation into historical reports of similar phenomena on Canoe Birch Lake, the note continued. Possible pattern of anomalous radio transmissions connected to disappearances. But there was no follow-up, no investigation. The note was just there in the file, ignored, forgotten, just like the voice had told us, going the wrong way. I drove out to the lake the next day. I don't know what I was looking for. Answers, maybe. Closure. Something to explain what was happening out there and why it kept happening. The lake was quiet. The search teams were gone. The snowmobiles and the equipment packed up and taken away. Just the ice and the snow and the trees. The same way it had been for thousands of years before any of us were here. I walked out to the center of the lake, alone. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was against every protocol, every common sense rule about wilderness safety. But I did it anyway. When I reached the spot where Varga's footprints had ended, I stopped and stood there, listening, waiting. The ice groaned beneath me, that same low, deep sound Elsie had noticed during the search. The lake settling, contracting, the frozen water adjusting to the cold. But it sounded different now, standing out here alone. It sounded like something breathing. You're going the wrong way. I spun around. The voice was right behind me, close, almost at my shoulder. But there was no one there. Just the empty ice, the empty sky. I pulled out my radio. Hello? Is someone transmitting? Silence. Then, faint, barely audible, another voice. Not the man's voice this time. A woman's voice. Help us. I felt the ice shift beneath my feet. Not a lot, just a tremor, but enough to make me freeze in place, suddenly acutely aware that I was standing on frozen water and the temperature was dropping and I was alone out here without anyone knowing where I was. Help us. The voice again, clearer now, and I realized it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from below me, from under the ice. I dropped to my knees, pressed my ear to the frozen surface. I could hear it. Not just the groaning of the ice, not just the pressure and the settling. Something else. Voices. Faint, distant, like they were coming from very far away, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. Help us. I scrambled back, heart pounding. This wasn't possible. There couldn't be voices under the ice. There was nothing under the ice but cold black water and mud, and whatever had sunk to the bottom over the years. But I had heard them. I got off the lake as fast as I could, half walking, half running, not looking back until I reached the landing and the safety of solid ground. I sat in my truck for a long time, hands shaking, trying to convince myself that I had imagined it. Stress, sleep deprivation, the isolation getting to me. There had to be a rational explanation, but I knew what I had heard, and I knew it changed everything. I went back to the files, all of them, not just the disappearance cases, everything the county had on Canoe Birch Lake, going back as far as the records went. What I found made me realize we had been looking at this the wrong way from the beginning. The lake had a history. Not just the disappearances, though that was part of it. A history that went back before the county was established, before the European settlers came, back to the Ojibwe people who had lived in this region for thousands of years. The Ojibwe had a name for Canoe Birch Lake. It didn't translate directly, but the closest English equivalent was something like the water that holds. The anthropological papers I found described it as a sacred site, a place of power, but also a place of danger. The Ojibwe had stories about the lake, stories about people who went out on the water and never came back, stories about voices that called from beneath the surface. They believed the lake was a doorway, not a door to somewhere else exactly, but a threshold. A place where the boundary between this world and whatever lies beyond it was thin. A place where things could pass through. And they believed that what passed through didn't always come back. I read those papers at my kitchen table at 2 a.m, coffee going cold beside me, and I thought about Dennis Varga walking out onto the ice. I thought about his footprints leading to the center of the lake and then stopping, just stopping, like he had stepped off the edge of the world. I thought about the 7 people before him who had done the same thing, walked out onto that ice and vanished without a trace. I thought about the voices I had heard. Help us. And I understood, finally, what the voice on the radio had been trying to tell me. You're going the wrong way. We had been searching for Dennis Varga as if he were lost, as if he had wandered off, gotten injured, fallen through the ice. We had been searching for him in this world, on this lake, in this reality. But he wasn't here anymore. He was somewhere else. Somewhere we couldn't reach, couldn't see, couldn't understand. Somewhere below the ice, below the water, in the place where the doorway opened. The place that the lake held on to and didn't let go. I didn't know what to do with this information. It wasn't something I could put in a report. It wasn't something I could tell the sheriff or the search team or Dennis Varga's widow. It wasn't something that would help anyone find anything, because there was nothing to find. Not here. Not anymore. But I kept thinking about those voices. Help us. Not just one voice. Voices. More than one person calling out from somewhere beneath the ice. Somewhere beyond the threshold. Dennis Varga, maybe. And Patricia Holloway from 1991. And the others. All the others who had walked out onto that ice and never walked back. They were still there. They were still there, and they were asking for help. I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know if it was even possible. But I knew I couldn't just leave it. I couldn't just go back to patrol and paperwork and pretend I hadn't heard what I'd heard. I called Jonah Wehmeyer. I told him what I'd found in the files, what I'd read about the Ojibwe beliefs, what I'd heard out on the ice. He listened without interrupting. That patient silence that some people have, the kind that makes you keep talking because you know they're actually listening. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My father heard them too." The voices. Yes. He never told anyone except family. But he heard them. The last time he went out on that lake, the year before he died. He said they were asking for help. What did he do? Nothing. What could he do? He couldn't help them. They were beyond help. Beyond anything we can understand. "So, that's it?" I said. "We just leave them there? Just forget about it and move on?" Another long silence. Then Wehmeyer said, "There might be something. Something my father talked about, something the old people used to do. I don't know if it will work. I don't know if any of it is real or just stories. But if you want to try, I'll come with you." That's how I found myself back on Canoe Birch Lake 3 nights later, in the dark, with Jonah Wehmeyer beside me. We walked out to the center of the ice, to the place where Dennis Varga's footprints had ended. It was cold, 20 below at least, and the sky was clear and full of stars, more stars than I had ever seen. The Milky Way, a bright band across the darkness. The lake was silent. No wind, no sound, just the vast stillness of the winter night. Wehmeyer had brought things with him. Tobacco, sweet grass, a bundle of sage. He laid them out on the ice in a pattern I didn't recognize, a circle with lines radiating out from the center. He told me what to do. It was simple. Just speak to them. Tell them it was okay to go. Tell them they didn't have to stay here anymore. I felt foolish at first, standing on the ice in the dark, talking to nothing. But I did it anyway. I said the names of the people who had disappeared. I said Dennis Varga's name. I told them we knew they were here. I told them we were sorry we couldn't find them. Sorry we couldn't bring them back. I told them they didn't have to stay. They could go. They could let go. The ice groaned beneath us. Then, from below, from somewhere deep down in the water or beyond it, the voices came. Not asking for help this time. Not calling out for rescue. Just voices, many of them, speaking words I couldn't understand in a language I didn't know. Speaking to each other maybe, or speaking to us. And then, one by one, falling silent. We stood there until the last voice faded, until the lake was quiet, until there was nothing left but the ice and the stars and the cold. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if we actually did anything, if we actually helped anyone. I don't know if the people who disappeared on Canoe Birch Lake went somewhere else, or just stopped existing or something beyond anything I can comprehend. But I haven't heard the voices since. I went back out there, a week later, and again, a month after that. Walked out to the center of the lake, stood where Varga's footprints had ended, listened. Nothing. The ice was just ice. The water was just water. The lake was just a lake. I filed a supplemental report on the Varga case. Kept it factual, kept it vague. Search suspended. Subject remains missing. No additional leads. The case is still open, technically. It will probably stay open forever. There's no body to find. There never was. But I added a note. Just for myself, just for the file. Just in case someone else ever comes looking. Recommend future search parties on Canoe Birch Lake exercise extreme caution, I wrote. Recommend avoiding the central area of the lake if possible. In the event of anomalous radio transmissions or unexplained phenomena, recommend immediate withdrawal to shore. I don't know if anyone will ever read that note. I don't know if it will help anyone. But maybe someday, someone will be standing out there on the ice, and they'll hear a voice on the radio telling them they're going the wrong way. Maybe they'll listen. Elsie Brandt stopped by the station last week. She does that sometimes, drops off paperwork, checks in with the deputies she knows. She asked about the Varga case, asked if there was any news. I told her no. No news, no body, no answers. She nodded, like she expected that. Then she said, "The lake is quiet now." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I grew up here," she said. "My grandmother used to tell me about the lake, about the sounds it made, the voices people heard. She said the lake was holding on to something, holding too tight." She paused, looking out the window toward the north, toward the lakes. She said someday someone would have to tell it to let go. I didn't know what to say to that. I don't know if what Waymeyer and I did made any difference. I don't know if the lake let go of anything, or if those people found peace, or if any of it means anything at all. But I know the voices stopped. And I know that this spring, when the ice went out and the water opened up again, a fisherman found something floating near the center of the lake. It was a glove. A black leather glove, insulated, just like the one we'd found on the eastern shore during the search. The match to it, in fact. Dennis Varga's gloves, together again. We sent them to his widow. There was nothing else to send. The lake doesn't give up her dead. That's what the old-timers say. But maybe sometimes she gives up something else. A glove, a memory, a chance to say goodbye. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all we can ask for. The file on Dennis Varga sits in my desk drawer. I take it out sometimes, flip through the pages, look at the photos of the ice and the ice house and the footprints that led nowhere. I think about him walking out onto that lake in the cold and the quiet, walking towards something he couldn't see and didn't understand. I think about the others who did the same thing before him. I think about the voices under the ice, asking for help. And I wonder what's on the other side of that doorway. I wonder what they saw when they stepped through. I wonder if it was terrible or beautiful or both. I wonder if we'll ever know. Probably not. Some things don't have answers. Some things can't be explained or understood or put in a report. They just happen, and you do your best to deal with them and you move on. But I still go out to Canoe Birch Lake sometimes. I park at the landing and look out across the ice, out toward the center where the doorway is, or was. I don't know if it's still there. I don't know if it ever was there, not really, not in any way I could prove or explain. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. And I know that there are things in this world that don't fit into reports and files and rational explanations. Things that exist in the spaces between what we know and what we can understand. Canoe Birch Lake is one of those spaces. I hope it stays quiet. I hope, wherever Dennis Varga is now, he found what he was looking for. I hope the water finally let go. The body came out of the woods on a Thursday evening in late November, right at the edge of dusk when the light goes gray and the trees turn into shadows. A couple of bow hunters found him, or what was left of him, lying in a frozen creek bed about 3 miles north of the old paper mill. They had been tracking a buck, following blood trail through the snow, when they came across something that made them forget all about hunting. A man, face down in the ice and leaves, wearing clothes that didn't match the season. A light jacket, thin pants, no hat or gloves. No identification, no wallet, no phone. Nothing that would tell you who he was or what he was doing out there in the middle of nowhere, dressed like it was September instead of the end of November. I was the responding deputy. My name is Reeve Halverson. I've worked with the Itasca County Sheriff's Department for 6 years, running patrol out of Grand Rapids. It's timber country up here, paper mills and logging operations. Small towns scattered through the forest like seeds. Beautiful country, but unforgiving. You can die out here a dozen different ways and the woods don't care. They'll take your body and keep it forever if you let them. By the time I reached the scene, full dark had fallen and the temperature was dropping fast. The hunters were waiting for me at their truck. 2 guys in their 40s, shaken up in that particular way that people get when they've seen something they weren't prepared for. They gave me the coordinates and pointed me toward the creek bed, and I hiked in with my flashlight and my camera, and the growing sense that this was going to be something different. I found the body exactly where they'd described. Male, probably late 30s, medium build. The cold had preserved him, kept the animals away so the body was mostly intact. But there was something wrong with the way he looked. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. His eyes were open. I've seen dead bodies before. Accidents, suicides, natural deaths. The eyes are usually closed, or if they're open they're flat and empty, just flesh and fluid like any other part. But this man's eyes were different. They were staring, wide open and staring at something I couldn't see. Something that seemed to be just over my shoulder, and the expression on his face was pure terror. I took photos, secured the scene, called it in. Medical examiner would have to come out in the morning. Too dark and too cold to process the scene properly tonight. I posted up at the edge of the road to wait for the transport team, and I sat in my cruiser with the heater running, and I tried not to think about the way that man had been looking at nothing. The body was transported to the county morgue in Grand Rapids around midnight. Dr. Lisette Storn, the medical examiner, was on call that night. I'd worked with her before on various cases. She was good at her job, thorough and careful, the kind of person who noticed things other people missed. She told me she'd do the initial examination first thing in the morning and would call me with anything significant. I went home to sleep. Didn't sleep well. Kept seeing those eyes, staring past me at something that wasn't there. The call from Dr. Storn came at 6:47 a.m. "You need to come in," she said. Her voice was strange, controlled, but with something underneath it. "There's something wrong with this body. I was at the morgue by 7. Dr. Storn met me at the door, still in her street clothes. She hadn't started the examination yet. She had barely gotten close to the body at all. "Look at him," she said. She led me into the examination room, to the steel table where the body lay under a white sheet. I've been a medical examiner for 19 years. I've seen every kind of death there is. I've never seen anything like this. She pulled back the sheet. The man looked the same as he had in the woods. Same thin clothes, same frozen stillness, same wide staring eyes. But now, in the bright lights of the examination room, I could see what had disturbed Dr. Storn. He wasn't decomposing. After a night in a warm morgue, any body would show some signs of change. Color shifts, tissue softening, the beginning of the processes that break down flesh. But this man looked exactly the same as he had in the frozen creek bed. Exactly. His skin was still pale and firm, his features still fixed, his muscles still rigid. He shouldn't look like this, Dr. Storn said. The cold slowed things down while he was in the woods, but once the body warmed up, decomposition should have started. It hasn't. It's like the biological processes just stopped. She moved to the head of the table, lifted one of the man's eyelids with a gloved finger. "And look at this," she said. The corneas should be clouded by now. The eyes should be drying out, losing their shape. But look, I looked, the eye was clear, bright. If not for the absolute stillness, the lack of breath or pulse, the man could have been alive. There's something else, Dr. Storn said. I took a blood sample when he first came in. I was going to run toxicology, see if there were any drugs in his system that might explain how he died. But when I looked at the sample this morning, it was gone. Gone? The vial was empty. The blood had evaporated. But blood doesn't evaporate like that. Not overnight, not in a sealed container. It just doesn't happen. I stood there looking at the body, at those clear, staring eyes, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. The kind of deep, primitive fear that exists underneath all the training and the experience. The fear that tells you something is wrong in a way you can't explain. What killed him? I asked. That's the thing, Dr. Storn said. I don't know. I can't find any obvious cause of death. No trauma, no disease, no apparent organ failure. By every measure I have, this man shouldn't be dead. She paused. But he is dead. Definitely dead. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no respiration. He's dead. She looked at me, and I could see my own unease reflected in her face. So, what killed him? I spent the day trying to identify the body, ran fingerprints through every database we had access to, sent photos to missing persons units across the state, contacted neighboring sheriff's departments to see if anyone matched a recent report. Nothing. The man was a ghost. No record of him anywhere. That evening, I drove back to the location where he'd been found. I wanted to search the area more thoroughly, see if there was anything we'd missed in the dark. The hunters had told me the man's clothes weren't right for the season, and that bothered me. You don't go walking in the Minnesota woods in late November wearing a light jacket and thin pants. Not unless you're planning to die, or unless you didn't plan to be out there at all. I searched a quarter-mile radius around the body site. Found nothing. No car keys, no wallet, no camping equipment, no sign that the man had arrived under his own power. No sign of how he had gotten there or where he had come from. The sun was going down by the time I finished, the light fading from the sky in bands of pink and orange. I stood in the clearing near the creek bed, looking at the trampled snow where we had walked the night before, and I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. A man appears in the woods, miles from any road, dressed for autumn instead of winter, with no identification and no obvious cause of death. His body doesn't decompose. His blood evaporates. His eyes stay clear. What the hell was I dealing with? I was walking back to my cruiser when I found the second body. She was about 50 yards from the first site, tucked into a depression between two fallen trees where the snow hadn't drifted as deep. I would never have seen her if I hadn't been cutting through that particular gap in the undergrowth, taking a shortcut back to the road. A woman, young, 20s maybe, wearing light clothes, just like the man. Face up, eyes open, staring at the sky with that same expression of absolute terror. I stumbled back, heart hammering, called it in with a voice that didn't sound like my own. 2 bodies. Same location, same condition, same look of fear frozen on their faces. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't exposure or hypothermia or any kind of natural death. Something had happened out here. Something had killed these people, and I had no idea what it was. The second body was transported to the morgue that night. Same examiner, same facility, same procedures. Dr. Storn worked late processing the new arrival, and I stayed with her, watching through the window of the examination room, waiting for answers that didn't come. The woman's body showed the same anomalies as the man's. No obvious cause of death, No decomposition despite hours in a warm environment. Clear eyes, firm skin, muscles locked in rigor without any sign of the natural relaxation that should follow. Blood samples that evaporated in their containers overnight. By midnight, Dr. Storn had run every test she could think of and found nothing. The woman was dead. Clearly and definitely dead, but there was no reason for it. Her organs were healthy, her tissues undamaged, her blood work normal in the brief window before the samples disappeared. She should be alive, Dr. Storn said. We were sitting in her office, surrounded by textbooks and anatomical charts, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago. By every measure I have, there's no reason for her to be dead. What about poison? I asked. Something that wouldn't show up on standard tests? It's possible. There are exotic toxins that are hard to detect. But I don't have the equipment to test for them here. I'd have to send samples to the state lab. She paused, looking at the paperwork on her desk. The problem is, I don't have samples to send. The blood keeps evaporating. Tissue samples are breaking down in ways I've never seen before. It's like their bodies are refusing to be examined. The power went out at 12:47 a.m. One moment the lights were on, the coffee maker was humming. The computer screens were glowing with data. The next moment, everything went dark. Just like that. No warning, no flickering, just instant and complete blackness. I pulled my flashlight, swept the beam across Dr. Storn's office. She was already on her feet, moving toward the door. The backup generator should kick in, she said. We have one for exactly this kind of situation. Morgues can't lose power. The cold storage... She stopped. We both heard it. A sound from down the hall, from the direction of the examination room. A sound like someone taking a breath. I drew my weapon. Dr. Storn grabbed a flashlight from her desk drawer, and together we moved into the hallway. The emergency lights should have come on by now. The generator should have started, but the building was dark, completely dark, and the only illumination was our flashlight beams cutting through the blackness. The sound came again. Breathing. Slow, shallow, ragged. Coming from the examination room where the two bodies lay. I reached the door first. Put my back to the wall, flashlight in one hand, weapon in the other. Took a breath. Went in. The room was cold. Not morgue cold. Not the maintained chill of the refrigeration units. Cold like outside. Cold like the woods where I'd found the bodies. My breath plumed white in the beam of my flashlight, and I could feel the temperature dropping with every second. The bodies were on their tables. The man on the left, the woman on the right. Sheets pulled up to their chins. Faces slack, eyes closed. Eyes closed. They had been open before. I had seen them. Wide and staring, filled with that frozen terror. Now they were closed, and the faces beneath them were calm, almost peaceful. And on the floor, all around the tables, there was snow. Not water. Not condensation from the cold. Snow. Actual snow, white and crystalline, dusting the floor in a thin layer that crunched under my boots when I stepped forward. I swept my flashlight around the room, the walls, the ceiling, the equipment, looking for any source of the snow, any explanation for how it could be here, in a sealed interior room in the middle of a building. There was nothing, just the snow on the floor, the cold in the air, and the two bodies on their tables, eyes closed now. Whatever fear they had felt finally gone from their faces. Dr. Storn came in behind me. I heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw the snow. "That's not possible," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "That's not possible, I know." The breathing sound came again. We both froze. It was coming from the table on the right, from the woman. I moved closer, weapon still raised, flashlight trained on her face. She wasn't breathing. She couldn't be breathing. She was dead. Dr. Storn had confirmed it herself. But I could hear it. Slow, shallow breaths. The sound of air moving in and out of lungs. I reached out and touched her hand. It was warm. I jerked back, heart pounding. The woman's hand was warm, not body temperature. Not like a living person, but warmer than it should be. Warmer than any dead body had a right to be. "Dr. Storn," I said. "Check her pulse." She stared at me. "Check her pulse? She's dead. Just do it." She moved forward, took the woman's wrist in her hands, pressed her fingers to the pulse point. A long moment passed. Dr. Storn's face went pale. "There's something," she said. Her voice was shaking. "It's weak, it's irregular, but there's something." "A heartbeat. That's not possible." "I know." The lights came back on, just like they had gone out, with no warning, no transition. 1 second darkness, the next second the fluorescent overheads blazing down on us. The hum of the ventilation system starting up again, the beep of equipment coming back online. The snow was gone. I looked down at the floor where it had been. Clean tile. No moisture, no residue, no sign that anything had ever been there. The woman's eyes opened. I brought my weapon up instinctively, but Dr. Storn grabbed my arm, pushed it down. "Wait," she said, "wait." The woman's eyes moved, tracking, focusing. She blinked once, twice, then she looked at us. Looked right at us, with full awareness, full consciousness, and she started to scream. Her name was Anna Kowalski. 26 years old, from a town in Wisconsin about 4 hours south of Grand Rapids. She was a graduate student in environmental science, had been doing research in the area for the past 3 weeks, studying soil samples and water quality in the forests north of the city. She told us this in fragments between fits of shaking and crying in the hours after she woke up on that morgue table. Dr. Storn wanted to transport her to the hospital immediately, but Anna refused. She wouldn't let go of my arm, wouldn't let us move her from the examination room. "They'll find me," she kept saying. "If I go out there, they'll find me." "Who?" I asked. "Who will find you?" But she wouldn't answer, or couldn't. Every time I pressed her on what had happened in the woods, what had killed her, what had brought her back, she would start hyperventilating, tears streaming down her face, unable to form words. The man on the other table, the one we hadn't identified, remained dead. Whatever had happened to Anna hadn't happened to him. His eyes stayed closed, his skin stayed cold, his heart stayed silent. He was gone, and he wasn't coming back. I called Sheriff Kellner, told him we had a situation. He didn't believe me at first. Didn't believe that a woman certified dead could be sitting up on a morgue table 6 hours later, alive and conscious and terrified out of her mind. I didn't blame him. I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't seen it myself. He came down to the morgue around 3 in the morning, took one look at Anna, one look at me, one look at Dr. Storn. "What the hell is going on here?" he said. "I don't know, sir, but we've got a living witness now. Whatever happened out there, she can tell us. If she'll talk, she'll talk. She just needs time." I was right about that. Not much time, as it turned out. Anna started talking around dawn, as the sky outside the morgue windows turned gray, and then pink, and then pale winter blue. I think she realized she had to. Realized that whatever was out there, keeping it to herself wouldn't make it go away. She had been collecting samples in the woods north of the old paper mill, an area she'd been working for 2 weeks without incident. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous, just trees and snow and the quiet of the winter forest. Then she found the clearing. She couldn't say exactly when it happened or how she had ended up there. 1 minute she was following a creek bed, looking for a good site to collect water samples. The next minute, she was standing in a circular clearing, maybe 30 feet across, ringed by trees so dense they seemed to form a wall. There was no snow in the clearing. That was the first thing she noticed. It was late November, and there was snow everywhere else. 6 inches at least, maybe more. But in this clearing, nothing. Just bare ground, dark and damp, like the snow had melted or been cleared away. The second thing she noticed was the man. He was standing in the center of the clearing. Not moving, just standing there looking at her, wearing a light jacket and thin pants. She called out to him, asked if he was okay, asked if he needed help. He didn't answer. She started to walk toward him, and that's when she felt it. Cold, she said. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like she was reciting from a script. Cold, like I've never felt before. Not weather cold, something else. It came from inside the clearing, from the ground. The man still didn't move, didn't speak. But his mouth was open, she saw now. Open like he was screaming, but no sound was coming out. I tried to leave, Anna said. I tried to turn around and walk away. But I couldn't move. I was standing at the edge of that clearing and I couldn't move. And then they came. Who? I asked. Who came? She shook her head. Not who. What? I waited. Shadows, she said. Shapes. Coming out of the trees, out of the ground. Not people, not animals. Just shapes. She was crying now, tears running down her face, but her voice stayed flat. They went into him, she said. Into the man. Through his mouth, through his eyes. And he just stood there and took it, stood there and let them. Then they came for me. She was quiet for a long moment. I don't remember what happened after that, she said. I don't remember anything until I woke up here. But I could feel them, inside me, looking out through my eyes, listening through my ears. She looked at me. They're still here, she said, in the woods, in that clearing. They've been here a long time, and they're looking for a way out. I drove out to the coordinates Anna gave me that afternoon. Corey Belstad, our dispatcher, stayed on the radio with me, tracking my location, checking in every 10 minutes. I wasn't going out there alone, not without someone knowing where I was. The clearing was exactly where Anna said it would be, about 3 miles north of the paper mill, in a section of forest that wasn't on any trail, wasn't near any road. I had to hike in for almost an hour, pushing through underbrush and deadfall, following the creek bed that Anna had been following when she found it. But when I reached the coordinates, there was no clearing, just trees. Dense, thick, unbroken forest, the same as everything around it. No circle of bare ground, no gap in the canopy, no sign that anything unusual had ever been here. I walked the area for an hour, searching for any indication of what Anna had described. Found nothing. Either the clearing didn't exist, or it wasn't here anymore, or it didn't want to be found. I reported back to the sheriff, told him what I'd seen, what I hadn't seen. He wasn't sure what to make of it. None of us were. We had a woman who had been dead and was now alive. A man who was still dead with no explanation. A story about shadows and shapes that sounded like a hallucination. And a clearing in the woods that didn't exist. No way to write this up, Kellner said. No way to make it make sense. I know. What do you want to do? I want to keep looking, I said. Something happened out there. Something killed that man. Almost killed Anna. I want to find out what. He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded. Be careful, he said, "Ow. Whatever this is, I don't want to lose anyone else to it." I didn't tell him that I had already decided to go back to the woods. Didn't tell him that I was planning to go at night, when Anna said the shapes had come out of the trees. Didn't tell him that I wasn't going to stop until I found the clearing, until I understood what had happened there. Some things you don't tell your sheriff. Some things you just do. I went back that night. I know how that sounds. I know it was stupid, reckless, the kind of decision that gets people killed in horror movies and cautionary tales. But I had to understand. I had to see for myself what was out there in the woods, what had taken the life of one person and almost taken another. I couldn't write the report and close the file and move on. Not with this. I parked at the old paper mill and hiked in by flashlight, following the same route I had taken that afternoon. The woods were different at night, quieter somehow. The snow absorbed sound, and the trees blocked the wind, and the whole forest had a muffled, suffocated quality that made me feel like I was walking through a room with the doors and windows sealed. I reached the coordinates around 10 o'clock, stood there in the dark, flashlight beam sweeping across the trees, looking for any sign of the clearing. Nothing. I expanded my search, walked a grid pattern, 50 yards in each direction, checking every gap in the trees, every open space. Found nothing. I was about to give up, about to turn around and head back to the truck when Corey's voice came over the radio. "Deputy Halverson, we've got a problem." I keyed the radio. "What kind of a problem?" "The woman," he said. "Anna. She's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean, she walked out of the hospital about an hour ago. Took her clothes from the closet and left. No one saw her go. We've got units looking, but..." He broke off. There was a burst of static, a sound like interference. Then his voice came back, different somehow, strained. "Deputy, I'm picking up something on the radio. Another transmission. I don't know what it is. Put it through." A pause, then a sound came through the radio. A voice, faint and distorted, buried in static, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, couldn't even tell if there were words. Just a sound, a whispering sound like voices speaking just below the threshold of comprehension. "Corey, can you trace that?" I said. "Can you tell where it's coming from?" No response. "Corey?" Static. "Corey, do you copy?" Nothing. I stood there in the dark, holding my radio, listening to the static and the whispering. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it at first, I became aware of something else. Cold. The temperature was dropping. Not the normal cold of a Minnesota November night. Something deeper than that. Something that seemed to come up from the ground, from the earth itself. I turned in a circle, flashlight out, scanning the woods. There was a gap in the trees. It hadn't been there before, I was certain of that. I had walked this exact spot 10 minutes ago, and there had been nothing but dense forest. But now there was a gap, a place where the trees fell back, where the darkness seemed thicker. The clearing. I walked toward it. I know I shouldn't have. I know I should have turned around and gotten out of there as fast as I could, but I walked toward it anyway, one step at a time, my flashlight beam reaching into that thick darkness and finding nothing. The clearing was there, just like Anna had described. Circular, maybe 30 feet across, ringed by trees. No snow on the ground. Just bare earth, dark and damp. And in the center, a figure. Anna. She was standing with her back to me, facing the trees on the far side of the clearing. Not moving. Just standing there, the same way the dead man had been standing when she found him. "Anna," I said. I kept my voice calm, steady. "Anna, you need to come with me. You need to get out of here." She didn't respond. I stepped into the clearing. The cold hit me like a wall, like walking into a freezer, into something beyond a freezer, a cold so intense it seemed to freeze my lungs, my blood, the thoughts in my head. I gasped, staggered, tried to keep my balance. Anna turned around. Her eyes were open, wide open, just like the dead man's had been. But there was something in them. something looking out. "They want out," she said. Her voice was wrong, too flat, too empty. "They've been here so long, they want to leave." "Who?" I managed. "Who wants to leave?" She smiled. It was the most terrible thing I've ever seen. "We do," she said. The shadows came out of the trees. I don't know how to describe them. They weren't shapes exactly. Weren't anything solid or defined. Just darkness. Areas of darkness that moved, that flowed, that came toward me across the clearing like water running downhill. I raised my weapon, knew it wouldn't do anything. Raised it anyway. "Deputy." A voice. Behind me. Real, human, not the whispering on the radio. I turned. Dr. Storn was standing at the edge of the clearing. I don't know how she got there. I didn't care. She had something in her hands, something that glowed. "Close your eyes," she said. I closed my eyes. Light. Even through my eyelids I could see it. Bright, white, pure. Filling the clearing, filling the world. And sound, the whispering sound, rising, becoming something else. Becoming a scream. Then silence. I opened my eyes. The clearing was empty. Anna was lying on the ground, unconscious but breathing. Dr. Storn was still standing at the edge of the trees, holding what I could now see was a heavy-duty industrial flashlight, the kind they use in search and rescue operations, bright enough to illuminate a mountainside. The shadows were gone. I stood there, shaking with cold and adrenaline, trying to understand what had just happened. "Light," Dr. Storn said. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. "They can't tolerate light. I don't know why, I don't understand what they are, but when the power went out at the morgue, when everything went dark, that's when they came. That's when Anna woke up, and when the lights came back on, they retreated." She looked at me. "I did some research after you left today. Historical records, indigenous accounts. There are stories about this place, this specific area of forest. Stories going back hundreds of years." "What kind of stories?" "Stories about things that live in the dark," she said. "Things that wait. Things that look for a way into our world, a way to inhabit it. They need hosts, living bodies they can enter. And they need darkness. That's how they move, how they spread." She looked down at Anna. "They were in her," she said, looking out through her eyes. "But they're gone now. The light drove them out." "Are they destroyed?" She shook her head. "I don't think so. I think they're just back in the clearing, back in the dark, waiting." I looked around at the trees, at the darkness beyond the reach of our flashlights. "Then we need to make sure no one else comes out here," I said. "Need to close this area off, keep people away." Dr. Storn nodded. "We can do that, but it won't last forever. Eventually someone will come." "Someone always comes. So what do we do?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't know, but I think we need to find out more about what they are, what they want, if there's a way to stop them, to close the door. It's in those old records. We just have to find it." We carried Anna out of the woods, called for an ambulance. She woke up on the way to the hospital and didn't remember anything after leaving her room. The last thing she recalled was a feeling of being called, of something pulling her toward the woods, toward the clearing. The man from the morgue was buried the following week. We never did identify him. No fingerprint matches, no dental records, no DNA in any database. He was a John Doe, and he went into the ground as a John Doe, and wherever he came from, whatever his story was, it went with him. I wrote my report, kept it factual. Victim found in woods, cause of death unknown. Second victim found nearby, also cause of death unknown. Victim later revived under unusual circumstances. Investigation ongoing. Nothing about shadows. Nothing about clearings that appear and disappear. Nothing about voices on the radio or things that live in the dark. Some things you don't put in reports. Some things you just know. The area north of the old paper mill has been closed to the public. Posted with no trespassing signs, monitored by regular patrols. We tell people it's environmental contamination, something in the soil. They stay away. But the clearing is still out there. I've been back twice. Once during the day, when it doesn't exist, when there's nothing but trees. Once at night, when it appears, when the darkness gathers and the cold rises from the ground and the whispering starts. I don't go in anymore. I just stand at the edge and I watch. And I make sure my flashlight is always fully charged. Dr. Storn has been researching, going through old records, indigenous histories, anything she can find about what lives in those woods. She's found some things. Stories about people who went into the forest and never came back. Stories about shapes in the darkness, about voices that call from the trees. Stories about a door that opens sometimes when the conditions are right and what comes through. We're trying to understand, trying to find a way to close the door for good, but it's slow work, and the winter is long, and the darkness comes earlier every day. Anna Kowalski recovered. Physically, at least. She went back to Wisconsin, back to her life. But she called me last week, said she's been having dreams. Dreams about the clearing, about the cold, about something watching her from the darkness. They're not gone, she said. They're still there, and they're still looking for a way out. I didn't know what to tell her, didn't know how to help. I just said to stay in the light. Stay in the light and don't go into any dark places alone. It's not much. It's all I have. Corey Belstad, our dispatcher, says he still hears the whispering sometimes. On certain frequencies, at certain times of night. Just barely there. Just below the threshold of comprehension. Voices speaking words he can't quite make out. He started leaving all the lights on in the dispatch center. All night, every night. Says it makes him feel better. I understand. I do the same thing at home now, every light on, every room bright. My electric bill has tripled, but I don't care. I'll take the expense over the alternative, because they're still out there. In the woods, in the clearing, in the darkness. Waiting, watching, looking for a way through. And I don't know how to stop them. I just know we have to try. The snow has started falling again. Winter is settling into the North Country. The nights getting longer, the darkness deeper. Soon the sun will set at 4 in the afternoon and not rise again until 8 the next morning. 16 hours of night. 16 hours of darkness. I'm not looking forward to it, but I'll be here. Running patrol, checking the perimeter around the paper mill, making sure no one wanders into those woods. Doing my job, and carrying the biggest flashlight I can find. Just in case. The last thing I want to say is this. I don't know what those things are. I don't know where they came from, or how long they've been there, or what they want. I don't know if they're ghosts or demons or something else entirely. Something that doesn't have a name in any language. But I know they're real. I know they killed a man and almost killed a woman. I know they're waiting in the darkness, in a clearing that exists only at night, looking for a way into our world. And I know that as long as they're there, I'll be watching. I'll be watching, and I'll be ready. And when they try to come through again, I'll be there to drive them back. It's not much of a plan, but it's what I have. And sometimes that has to be enough. The Iron Range has always been a place of echoes. You can feel it when you drive those old mining roads, past the abandoned pit mines that gape like wounds in the earth, past the ghost towns where the houses still stand but the people are long gone. The whole region feels hollowed out, emptied, like something vital was taken from it and never put back. The taconite industry kept some of the towns alive, but others just faded away, leaving behind rusted machinery and crumbling foundations, and the sense that you're always being watched by something that isn't there anymore. My name is Sigrid Moen. I've been a deputy with the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department for 14 years, working out of Virginia, Minnesota, right in the heart of the Iron Range. I grew up here, left for college and the police academy, then came back because this is home, because the lakes and the forests and the long winter nights are in my blood. I know this place the way you know your own face in the mirror. I know its rhythms and its moods and its secrets. Or, I thought I did. The calls started in October, right around the time the leaves were turning and the first frost was settling on the ground. Dispatch began receiving reports of strange signals on various radio frequencies. Ham radio operators picking up voices that didn't correspond to any known transmission. Truckers on the CB hearing conversations that seemed to come from nowhere. Even some of the local police scanners were catching fragments of something that didn't belong on the airwaves. At first, we wrote it off as interference. The Iron Range is full of old mining equipment, abandoned infrastructure, miles of underground tunnels that can play havoc with radio waves. Strange signals weren't unusual. Strange signals that made sense, that sounded like actual human voices saying actual words. That was different. The first report I took personally came from a retired mining engineer named Edwin Torvald. 73 years old, sharp as a tack, not the type to imagine things or make up stories. He had been monitoring his ham radio the way he did every evening, scanning the frequencies for distant contacts when he picked up something that made him call the sheriff's department. A distress call. A woman's voice, he told me, sitting in his living room surrounded by radio equipment and old mining photographs. Clear as a bell. She said she was trapped, said she couldn't get out, gave coordinates, longitude and latitude, very precise. "Did you write them down?" I asked. He handed me a piece of paper. I looked at the numbers, felt something cold settle in my stomach. The coordinates pointed to a location in the middle of the Mesabee Iron Range about 15 miles north of Virginia, to a place I knew, the Northland Mine. The Northland had been one of the biggest open-pit operations in the region back in the 50s and 60s. Then the ore ran out and the company moved on, leaving behind a pit half a mile wide and 300 feet deep, slowly filling with groundwater. The site had been fenced off for decades, posted with warning signs, but people still went out there sometimes. Teenagers looking for a place to party, photographers drawn to the eerie beauty of the flooded pit, the occasional urban explorer searching for relics of the mining days. And sometimes people went out there and didn't come back. I drove to the Northland Mine that afternoon. The access road was overgrown but passable, the fence rusted and breached in several places. I parked at the edge of the pit and got out, stood there looking down at the water that had filled what used to be one of the most productive iron mines in the world. The pit was massive. Even after all these years, it was hard to comprehend the scale of what had been dug out of the earth here. The walls were terraced, carved in giant steps that descended into the blue-green water, and the far side was so distant it looked hazy. The water itself was clear and cold and very, very deep. They said it went down hundreds of feet in places, filling the tunnels and shafts that had been dug beneath the open pit. I walked the perimeter of the accessible area, looking for any sign of recent activity, any indication that someone had been here, that someone might be in trouble. I found nothing, just the pit and the water and the wind blowing across the empty landscape. I called the coordinates into dispatch, asked them to check missing persons reports for the area. They came back with nothing. No one had been reported missing. No one was looking for anyone out here. I went back to the office and filed my report. logged the incident as a possible hoax or misidentified transmission, put it aside and moved on to other things. 3 days later, Edwin Torvald called again. The woman was back on the radio. Same voice, he said. Same message. She's trapped. She can't get out. But this time, she said something else. What? She said, "They can hear you. They know you came looking." I felt that cold feeling again, deeper this time. "Who can hear me?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, Deputy." But she sounded scared, more scared than before. I went back to the Northland mine the next day. This time, I brought backup. Deputy Carl Nystrom, 10 years on the force, solid and unflappable. We searched the area more thoroughly, checking every accessible point around the perimeter of the pit, looking for any sign of a person in distress. We found something. It was in one of the old maintenance buildings near the edge of the pit, a concrete structure that had been used for equipment storage back when the mine was operational. The door was rusted, but not locked, and when we pushed it open, we found ourselves in a single large room filled with old machinery, workbenches, tools that hadn't been touched in decades, and a radio. It sat on one of the workbenches, an old tube-type ham radio from the 50s or 60s, the kind that would have been used by mining operations to communicate across the range. It was dusty and corroded, clearly hadn't been functional in years, but it was plugged in. The power cord ran across the floor and out through a hole in the wall. We followed it outside and found that it connected to a generator, a modern portable unit that was sitting behind the building hidden from view. The generator was off, but the fuel tank was full. Someone had been here. Someone had set this up. We searched the building more carefully, found nothing else out of the ordinary. No sign of habitation, no personal items, no indication of who had brought the generator or why. I photographed everything, bagged the radio as evidence, called in a forensics team to check for prints and DNA. Then I went back to the office and started making calls. Who owned that land? Who had access? Who might have a reason to set up a radio in an abandoned building and broadcast fake distress signals? The answers I found didn't help. The land was owned by a holding company that had bought it from the mining corporation 30 years ago. The company was defunct, its principals long dead or moved away. The property had been tied up in legal limbo ever since. No clear owner, no one responsible for maintenance or security. Anyone could have gone out there. Anyone could have set up that radio. But why? And why did the woman on the radio say they knew I was coming? The signals continued. Over the next 2 weeks, we received 17 reports of strange transmissions on various frequencies. Ham operators, CB users, even one deputy who picked something up on his patrol car radio. All described the same thing. A woman's voice, sometimes clear, sometimes buried in static, talking about being trapped, about not being able to get out, about something that could hear her. The locations varied. Sometimes the voice gave coordinates to the Northland mine. Sometimes to other abandoned sites on the range. The Spruce Mine, closed since 1978. The old Mesabi Railroad Depot, burned down in the 90s. A collapsed ore processing plant near Eveleth. All places that had been abandoned for years. All places where people could theoretically be trapped without anyone knowing. We searched every location, found nothing. No one in distress, no sign of recent human activity, no explanation for the transmissions. The forensics on the radio came back inconclusive. No usable prints, no DNA. The unit itself was exactly what it appeared to be. A vintage ham radio that hadn't been operational in decades. The tubes were burned out, the wiring was corroded. There was no way it could transmit anything. But someone had plugged it in. Someone had connected it to a generator. And someone was broadcasting on frequencies that radio shouldn't have been able to reach. I started looking into the history of the sites where the signals had pointed. The Northland Mine, the Spruce Mine, the others. I was looking for a pattern, a connection, something that would explain why these particular locations had been chosen. What I found was deaths. The Northland Mine had claimed 7 lives during its operational years. Cave-ins, equipment failures, falls. The Spruce Mine had claimed 4. The railroad depot had burned down with 3 workers inside. The processing plant collapse had killed 2. 16 deaths across 4 sites, all of them places where the voice on the radio had said she was trapped. I brought this to Sheriff Anders Lindgren. He was a good boss, methodical and open-minded. The kind of person who wouldn't dismiss something just because it was strange. He listened to my report, looked at the files I had assembled, sat back in his chair and thought about it. "You're suggesting these signals are connected to the deaths at these sites," he said. "Connected how? I don't know. I'm just noting the correlation. Every location the voice has pointed to is a location where people died." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's been a lot of death on the Iron Range, Deputy. Mining is dangerous work. If you look at any abandoned site out here, you'll probably find a history of accidents and fatalities." He was right. I knew he was right. But something about this felt different, felt deliberate. I went to see Edwin Torvald again. He was still monitoring his radio, still picking up the voice occasionally. I asked him if he had ever heard anything like this before, in all his years of ham operation. He shook his head. "I've heard a lot of strange things on the radio, Deputy. Atmospheric phenomena, skip transmissions from thousands of miles away, signals bouncing off the ionosphere in ways you wouldn't expect. But I've never heard anything like this. This isn't a natural phenomenon. This is someone trying to communicate. Someone or something," he added quietly. I asked him what he meant. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I grew up on the range, worked in the mines for 30 years before I retired. I've heard the stories. We all have." "What stories?" He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Something like fear. Stories about things that live in the old workings, in the tunnels and shafts that go down into the earth. Things that were disturbed when we started digging. Things that were here long before us. The old Finns called them mahinen. Earth spirits. They said if you went too deep, if you took too much, they would take something back. I didn't know what to say. I had heard those stories too growing up. Old folklore, immigrant superstition. I had never taken them seriously, but I was taking the signals seriously, and I didn't have a better explanation. I drove out to the Northland Mine again that night. Alone, this time. I know I shouldn't have. I know it was against protocol, against common sense. But I needed to see the place in the dark. Needed to see if it felt different when the sun went down. It did. The pit was massive in daylight, but at night it was something else entirely. A void, an absence, a hole in the world. The water at the bottom was invisible in the darkness, and the terraced walls were just suggestions of shape, barely distinguishable from the black sky above. I stood at the edge and looked down into that emptiness, and I felt like I was looking into something that was looking back. My radio crackled. I grabbed it, keyed the transmit button. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Moen. Did you just try to reach me?" "Negative," came the reply. "No transmission from dispatch." I stood there, radio in hand, waiting. The night was quiet, no wind, no sound. Just the emptiness of the pit, and the darkness, and the feeling that I was not alone. Then the voice came through. Not on the dispatch channel, on a different frequency, one that my radio shouldn't have been able to receive. A woman's voice, faint but clear. "They're waiting for you." I spun around, scanning the darkness with my flashlight. There was nothing there. No one. They've been waiting a long time. I keyed the radio. Who is this? Where are you? Silence, then static, then nothing. I got back in my cruiser and drove away from there as fast as the road would allow. I didn't stop until I was back in Virginia, back in the light and the noise of town. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the sheriff's station, hands shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Someone was doing this. Someone was playing a very elaborate game, using radios and recordings and careful staging to create the impression of something supernatural. There had to be a rational explanation. There was always a rational explanation. But when I closed my eyes, I could still hear that voice. They're waiting for you. They've been waiting a long time. I started digging into the history of the Iron Range. Not just the mining history, but everything. The indigenous peoples who had lived here before European settlement. The early explorers, the immigrants who came to work the mines. I was looking for anything that might connect to what was happening. Any legend or tradition that might explain the signals, the voice, the feeling that something was present in those abandoned places. What I found was more than I expected. The Ojibwe, who had lived in this region for centuries before the mining began, had stories about the area where the Mesabi Range would eventually be discovered. They called it a place of power, but also a place of danger. The iron in the earth was sacred to them. They believed it held spirits, entities that lived in the rock and the soil, that had been there since the beginning of the world. They also believed that disturbing the iron would disturb those spirits. When the mining began in the 1890s, the indigenous warnings were ignored. Of course they were. There was money to be made, fortunes to be built. The iron ore of the Mesabi Range was some of the richest in the world, and nothing was going to stop its extraction. But the old-timers on the range, the Finns and Norwegians and Italians who worked the mines, they developed their own stories, their own warnings. They talked about sounds in the tunnels, voices, footsteps in empty shafts. They talked about colleagues who went into the deep workings and came out different, changed, like something had touched them down there. And they talked about the signals. I found references going back to the 1920s, when radio technology first came to the range. Miners reported picking up strange transmissions on their equipment, voices that didn't belong to anyone they knew, speaking languages they didn't recognize. The phenomenon was documented in company reports, in newspaper articles, in personal diaries that ended up in historical archives. The signals would come and go. Sometimes years would pass without incident. Then something would trigger them. A new mine opening, a tunnel being dug into previously unexplored ground, an accident that claimed lives. The signals were always strongest after deaths. I took this information to Sheriff Lindgren. He was skeptical, as I knew he would be. Folklore and superstition were not evidence. They were not grounds for an investigation. But he didn't dismiss me. "What do you think is happening?" he asked. "I think there's something out there," I said. "In the old mines, in the tunnels, in the ground. I don't know what it is, whether it's natural or supernatural or something in between. But I think it's real. And I think it's trying to communicate. Communicate what? I don't know. But the voice keeps saying she's trapped. She keeps saying she can't get out." I paused. What if she's not the only one? Lindgren thought about that for a while. Then he authorized me to continue the investigation, but with certain conditions. I was not to go to any of the abandoned sites alone. I was to report any developments immediately. And I was to keep detailed records of everything I found, everything I experienced, everything that happened. He didn't say why. He didn't have to. We both knew that if this turned out to be something real, something unexplainable, there would need to be documentation. There would need to be proof. I brought in Deputy Carl Nystrom and Deputy Angela Fierro. both experienced, both reliable. I told them what I had found, what I suspected, what we were looking for. They listened without interrupting. When I finished, Carl was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My grandfather worked the mines. He used to tell me stories about the things he heard down there. I always thought he was exaggerating, trying to scare me." He looked at me. Now, I'm not so sure. Angela had grown up in Duluth, hadn't heard the old stories the way Carl and I had, but she was a good investigator, thorough and objective. If there was something to find, she would find it. We established a schedule of regular patrols to the key sites: the Northland Mine, the Spruce Mine, the railroad depot, the processing plant. We set up monitoring equipment at each location: audio recorders, motion sensors, temperature gauges. We wanted to capture anything that might be happening there, any sign of the signals, any indication of their source. For 2 weeks, we recorded nothing. The equipment ran continuously, monitoring every sound, every movement, every fluctuation in temperature. We collected hundreds of hours of audio, terabytes of data. All of it was normal. Background noise, ambient sounds, the usual activity of abandoned places settling and decaying. But the reports of signals kept coming. Ham operators, CB users, scanner listeners. All across the range, people were picking up the voice. Sometimes it said the same things. Trapped, can't get out. They know you're listening. Sometimes it said new things. Names, places, warnings. One night, Edwin Torvald called me at home. "She's saying something different now," he said. His voice was strained, worried. "She's saying they're coming up. She's saying they're going to come up and they won't go back down." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Coming up from where?" "From the ground, deputy. From under the earth. From where we put them." That night, there was an incident at the Spruce Mine. Angela Fierro was on patrol, making her regular check of the monitoring equipment. She called in at 11:47 p.m. to report that she was on site and everything was normal. At 12:15 a.m., dispatch received another transmission from her radio. But it wasn't Angela's voice. It was the woman. She said 5 words, clear and distinct: "They're here with me now." Then nothing. We mobilized immediately. Every available unit converged on the Spruce Mine. I was the first to arrive, 23 minutes after the transmission. Angela's cruiser was parked at the site, lights on, engine running. The door was open. Angela was gone. We searched through the night. Every building, every structure, every accessible point around the mine. We brought in dogs. We brought in a helicopter with thermal imaging. We called in mutual aid from every department in the area. 73 people searching for one missing deputy. We found her boots. They were sitting at the edge of the main pit, placed neatly side by side, as if she had taken them off and left them there. Beyond them was nothing but the dark water that had filled the mine when the pumps stopped running decades ago. I stood at the edge and looked down. The water was black and still and gave nothing away. We brought in divers at first light. They searched the upper levels of the flooded pit, the areas they could reach safely. Found nothing. The deeper sections were too dangerous. Old mine workings, collapsed tunnels, unstable walls. Too many places where a diver could get trapped, could get lost, could become another body that the mine would never give back. By noon, the search shifted from rescue to recovery. I couldn't accept it. Angela Fierro was my colleague, my responsibility. I had brought her into this investigation, put her in harm's way. If she was dead, it was because of me. But I didn't believe she was dead. I don't know why. I had no evidence, no reason to hope, just a feeling. A conviction that what was happening here was not finished, that Angela was not lost, that there was still something to find if I could only figure out where to look. The voice had said, "They're here with me now." Who was here? where was here? I went back to the recordings from the night Angela disappeared. The monitoring equipment at the spruce mine had captured everything that happened. I listened to it all. For the first 2 hours, nothing unusual. Ambient sounds, the creak of old buildings, the whisper of wind through broken windows. Then, at 11:52 p.m., 5 minutes after Angela's initial check-in, something changed. A sound, low, rhythmic, almost like breathing, coming from somewhere inside the mine. Then voices. Not the woman's voice. Not any single voice. Many voices, overlapping, murmuring, speaking words I couldn't make out. They grew louder over the next several minutes, rising in intensity until they were almost shouting. Then Angela's voice, clear and sharp. "Who's there? Identify yourself." The voices stopped. Silence. Then, at 12:03 a.m., 12 minutes before the transmission that dispatch had received, Angela spoke again. "Deputy Fierro requesting backup. There's someone here. Multiple individuals. They're coming out of the mine." She gave her location, called for assistance. Her voice was steady, professional. Then she said something else, something quiet, almost to herself. "They're not right. Something's wrong with them." After that, nothing. The recording ended at 12:08 a.m. The transmission to dispatch came 7 minutes later, but it hadn't been Angela's voice. It had been the woman. What had happened in those 7 minutes? I enhanced the audio, filtered it, analyzed it with every tool I had available. I found fragments, sounds that might have been footsteps, or might have been something else. A sound that might have been Angela screaming, or might have been static. Nothing clear, nothing that told me what I needed to know. I went to Sheriff Lindgren. "She saw something," I said. "People coming out of the mine. She said there was something wrong with them." "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to go in." "Into the mine?" I nodded. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "I can't authorize that. It's too dangerous. The structural integrity is compromised, the water levels are unknown. I can't send anyone in there. Then I'll go alone." "I'm telling you no, Deputy." I didn't argue, but I didn't agree either. That night, I drove to the spruce mine. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't call it in. I knew what I was doing was against direct orders, against all protocols, against common sense. But Angela was out there somewhere. Angela was trapped. And the voice kept saying, "They know you're listening." They knew. They had been listening all along. The mine was different at night. The darkness was absolute. The silence, total. I made my way past the outer buildings to the main pit, to the place where Angela's boots had been found. The water was still and black, reflecting nothing, giving nothing away. There was an access tunnel on the north side of the pit. One of the old mine entrances, boarded up decades ago when the operation closed. I had seen it during our searches, but hadn't paid it much attention. The boards were nailed tight, the entrance sealed. Now the boards were pulled away. I approached carefully, flashlight in one hand, weapon in the other. The tunnel entrance gaped like a mouth, breathing out cold air that smelled of water and rust and something else, something organic, something that might have been decay. I went in. The tunnel was narrow, low-ceilinged, shored up with old timbers that creaked and groaned with every step. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing rough rock walls, rusted rails on the floor, old mining equipment abandoned where it had sat for half a century. The air was cold and damp and got colder the deeper I went. After about 100 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. A junction, maybe, where multiple tunnels had once converged. My flashlight couldn't reach the far walls. The darkness pressed in from all sides. I stopped, listened. At first, nothing. Just the silence and the cold and the weight of the earth above me. Then I heard it. breathing, not mine, coming from somewhere in the darkness ahead of me. Slow, rhythmic, like someone sleeping, or like many someones. "Hello?" I called out. "Deputy Fierro, are you in here?" The breathing stopped. Silence. Then the voices started, all around me, coming from everywhere and nowhere. The murmuring I had heard on the recording, but louder now, clearer. Words in languages I didn't recognize. Words that sounded like English but weren't quite. Words that seemed to be speaking to each other, about me, while I stood there in the darkness, listening. I brought my weapon up, swept my flashlight in a circle. The beam found nothing. Just empty darkness, empty air. "Angela," I shouted, "if you can hear me, call out." The voices stopped. "She can't answer you." The woman's voice, right beside me, so close I could have touched her if she had been there. But there was no one there, no one I could see. "She's with us now." "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want?" "We want out." The voice was different now. Not just one woman. Many voices, layered together, speaking as one. "We've been here so long, in the dark, under the earth. We want to come out." I felt something touch my arm. Something cold, something that gripped with strength that shouldn't have been possible. I twisted away, fired a shot into the darkness, the sound enormous in the confined space. The grip released, the voices laughed, I ran. I don't know how I found my way out. The tunnel twisted and branched, and I wasn't thinking clearly. I just ran, following my flashlight beam, bouncing off walls, stumbling over debris until suddenly I was outside again, standing at the entrance of the mine, gasping for breath, my heart hammering so hard I could barely think. I got in my cruiser and drove away from there. I didn't stop until I was back in Virginia. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the sheriff's station, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. I had gone into the mine. I had heard the voices. Something had grabbed me. And they had said Angela was with them. She was alive. I was sure of it now, and I was going to get her back. I didn't tell Sheriff Lindgren about my unauthorized trip to the mine. I couldn't. I had disobeyed a direct order, had gone alone into a dangerous situation without backup or notification. If he found out, I would be suspended. Maybe fired. But I also couldn't stop. Angela was alive. The voices had told me so. She was with them, wherever they were, whatever they were, and if I was going to get her out, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I went back to the research, dug deeper this time. Not just folklore and legend, but technical records. Engineering reports, geological surveys, anything that might tell me what was in those old mines. What we had dug into. What we had disturbed. The Iron Range sits on one of the oldest rock formations in North America. The Canadian Shield, more than 2 billion years old. The iron ore that made the range famous was formed in ancient seas, laid down in layers over millions of years, then compressed and metamorphosed into the rich deposits that the mining companies found. But there were other things in those rocks. The geological surveys documented anomalies, areas where the standard formations didn't hold, where the rock was different in ways the geologists couldn't fully explain. Pockets of unusual mineral compositions. Cavities that seemed to have formed naturally but didn't match any known geological process. Depths where the surveys simply stopped returning data, as if there was nothing there to measure, or as if whatever was there didn't want to be measured. I found one report that stood out. A survey from 1957, conducted at the Spruce Mine during the height of its operation. The company had been planning to extend one of the deeper tunnels, and they needed to know what they would be digging into. The survey found something unexpected. About 300 feet below the deepest existing tunnel, there was a void. Not a natural cavern, the geologists wrote. Something else. The rock around it was different in composition, different in structure. It absorbed rather than reflected the survey signals. It was as if there was a space in the earth that didn't want to be seen. The company halted the tunnel extension. Too risky, the report said. Too many unknowns. 3 years later, the spruce mine was closed. I drove out to see Edwin Torvald, showed him what I had found. He looked at the reports, nodded slowly. There were stories about the deep places, he said. The miners who worked the lowest levels, they talked about hearing things, seeing things, lights in tunnels where there shouldn't be lights, sounds that didn't match any equipment or operation. He paused. Some of them said the mine was alive, that the deeper you went, the more you could feel it, like a heartbeat way down in the earth. Did anyone ever go to the bottom? I asked. Did anyone ever find out what was down there? He shook his head. Some tried. Most came back saying there was nothing, just more rock. But a few didn't come back at all. And the ones who did come back, some of them were different. Different how? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "They didn't talk about it." That's how I knew something was wrong. Miners talk about everything. The conditions, the dangers, the things they see. But the ones who went to the bottom, they never said a word. I left Torvald's house with more questions than answers. But I was starting to form a theory. A picture of what might be happening in those old mines. Something was down there. In the deep places. In the voids that the surveys couldn't penetrate. Something that had been there for a very long time, maybe as long as the rocks themselves. The mining had disturbed it, opened connections between its world and ours, and now it was trying to come up. They want out. The voice had said it. They had been there so long, in the dark, under the earth. They wanted to come out. And they were using the signals to reach us. Using our technology, our radios, our frequencies. Finding ways to communicate, to be heard. But why? What did they want from us? I thought about Angela, about her boots at the edge of the pit, placed so neatly. About her voice on the recording, saying there was something wrong with them. I thought about the hand that had gripped my arm in the darkness of the mine. Cold. Strong, wrong. They wanted out, and they needed us to let them. I went to Sheriff Lindgren, told him what I had found. The geological reports, the void beneath the spruce mine, the history of strange occurrences in the deep workings. I didn't tell him I had been inside the mine, didn't tell him about the voices, the hand, the things I had heard. I just laid out the data and let him draw his own conclusions. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "What are you proposing?" he asked finally. "I want to go back to the spruce mine. I want to find that void. I want to see what's down there. That's suicide. Maybe. But Angela is down there. She's alive." I heard them say so. He looked at me sharply. "You heard? When?" I hesitated. Then I told him. All of it. The unauthorized trip, the tunnel, the voices, the thing that had grabbed me. When I finished, I expected him to be angry. Expected him to suspend me on the spot. Instead, he just sat there, looking at his desk, thinking. "I'm not going to suspend you," he said finally. "Not because what you did was okay. It wasn't. But I'm not going to take you off this case. Not now. Not when we have a missing deputy and something happening that I can't explain." He looked up at me. "But you're not going alone. If you go back to that mine, you're going with a full team. Proper equipment. Backup on the surface. And you follow every safety protocol to the letter. Understood?" "Understood," he nodded. Then he said, "Find her, Sigrid. Find her and bring her back. I will. I meant it." The operation took 3 days to organize. We brought in a mine rescue team from the state. specialists who had experience with abandoned and flooded workings. We got engineers to assess the structural integrity of the accessible tunnels, identify the safest routes to the deeper levels. We assembled equipment, ropes, breathing apparatus, communication systems, lights. Lots of lights. I had been thinking about that. The things in the mind seemed to exist in darkness, to emerge from it. The voices had come from places my flashlight couldn't reach. Whatever had grabbed me had let go when I fired my weapon, when there was a flash of light. Maybe light was a weapon. Maybe it was the only weapon we had. The team that would make the descent consisted of 6 people. Myself, Deputy Nystrom, 2 mine rescue specialists named Patton and Greaves, a geologist from the university named Dr. Holmquist, and a communications tech named Rivera, who would maintain contact with the surface team. We gathered at the spruce mine on a Thursday morning. Clear skies, cold air, the kind of day that makes you feel like nothing bad could happen. We reviewed the plan one more time, checked our equipment one more time, ran through the safety protocols one more time. Then we went in. The access tunnel was the same one I had used on my solo trip. The boards had been removed entirely now, the entrance cleared and shored up with new timbers. We moved in single file, lights illuminating the way. Rivera unreeling communication cable behind us as we went. The tunnel was about 200 yards long. At the far end was the junction chamber I had found before, where the voices had come from. We paused there, swept the space with our lights. Empty. Silent. No sign of what I had experienced that night. We continued down. There were multiple routes from the junction, tunnels that branched off in different directions, leading to different parts of the old mine. The engineers had identified one that should take us toward the location of the void from the geological survey. It was partially flooded, but passable with the right equipment. We followed it. The deeper we went, the colder it got. And there was something else, a feeling, hard to describe. Like the air was thicker, heavier. Like the darkness beyond our lights was not just absence of light, but something more substantial. Something that was pressing in on us. No one said anything, but I could see it in the others' faces. They felt it too. After about an hour, we reached the flooded section. The tunnel floor dropped away, filled with black water that our lights couldn't penetrate. According to the engineers, it was about 50 feet to the other side, where the tunnel rose again and continued toward the deep workings. Patton and Greaves went first. They were the experienced ones, the ones who had done this before. They waded into the water, testing the footing, checking for obstacles. The rest of us followed, the water rising to our chests, cold enough to take your breath away. We made it through. The tunnel on the other side was narrower, rougher, less maintained than what we had passed through before. This was part of the mine that had been closed before the rest, sealed off when the company decided not to extend into the deep formations. We were in unexplored territory now. The feeling got stronger the deeper we went. The sense of pressure, of presence. I kept my light moving, scanning the walls, the ceiling, the darkness ahead, looking for anything out of place, looking for any sign that we were not alone. We found it about 2 hours into the descent. A chamber, not large, maybe 20 feet across, but different from the rest of the mine. The walls were smooth, polished almost, like they had been worn down by water or by something else. And on the floor, scattered like fallen leaves, were objects. Boots, gloves, tools, personal items, things that had been left behind or lost or taken. Angela's service weapon was there. I recognized it by the serial number. "This is where they bring people," I said. My voice sounded strange in the enclosed space. "This is where they keep them." "Where are they now?" Nystrom asked. "I don't know. Deeper, maybe. Or..." The lights went out. All of them. At once. Total darkness. So absolute it was like being blind. For a moment there was silence, then Rivera's voice, tense but controlled. "I'm trying to restore," she said. "Equipment failure. I don't know what—" The voices started, all around us just like before, but louder now, clearer, words overlapping, languages mixing, a cacophony of sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. And underneath the voices, something else. Breathing. The slow, rhythmic breathing I had heard before. But now it was close. Now it was right next to us. Someone screamed. Greaves, I think. There was a sound of scuffling, struggling. "Hold your positions," I shouted. "Everyone stay calm." I fumbled for my backup flashlight, hands shaking, heart pounding. Found it, switched it on. The beam cut through the darkness and found them. Figures standing around us in a circle, pale, indistinct, features that didn't quite resolve into faces. They were standing perfectly still, watching us. And behind them in the darkness beyond my light's reach were more. Dozens, maybe hundreds, filling the tunnel, pressing forward, waiting. One of them stepped closer. Into the light. It was Angela, but not Angela. Her body, her face, but something wrong with it. Something in the way she moved, the way she held herself. Something in her eyes that wasn't her. "You came," she said. But it wasn't her voice. It was the voice, the woman. The many voices speaking as one. "You came for her. I'm taking her back," I said. "I'm taking her out of here." The thing wearing Angela's face tilted its head. A strange gesture, curious, like a bird examining something it doesn't understand. "She's with us now," it said. "They're all with us. The ones who came down, the ones who dug too deep. We keep them, we hold them, let them go. We can't. Why? Because they're the only way out. They're the door. While they're here, the door is open." I didn't understand, but I could see the others, the figures in the darkness, the ones who had been lost in the mines over all the years, the ones who had come down and never come back up. They were all here, all preserved, all waiting. Waiting for what? "To leave," the voice said, answering the question I hadn't asked aloud. "To come up, to be in the light again." It stepped closer. Angela's face, Angela's eyes, but nothing behind them. "We've been here so long, since before the mining, since before the people. We were here when this rock was formed, when this land was young. We live in the dark in the deep places, but we want to feel the sun again." I kept my light trained on the figure, on the others behind it. They didn't advance. The light was holding them. "If I let you out," I said, "what happens to the people you've taken?" "They stay with us. Part of us. Always. And if I don't let you out, then we wait. We're patient. We've waited a long time. We can wait longer." It smiled. Angela's smile, but wrong. "But she can't wait. She's still fighting us. She's strong, but she won't last forever. Eventually, she'll stop. They all stop eventually. Eventually." I looked at the thing wearing my colleague's face, at the shapes in the darkness behind it, at the chamber full of lost things, lost people, lost hope. And I made a decision. I turned off my light. For a moment, there was absolute darkness. Then I heard the others on my team, their flashlights clicking on, cutting through the black. "Don't!" I shouted. "Keep them off!" Confusion, protests. But they listened. The darkness held. And in the darkness I felt them move closer. The figures, the voices, pressing in, surrounding us. "You think this will help?" the voice said. "You think the darkness makes you stronger? We are the darkness. We are what lives in it." "I know," I said, "but I'm not here to fight you. Then why are you here? To make a deal?" Silence. The breathing sound all around us. Then, "What deal?" You want out, I said. You want to feel the sun, but you can't do it without a host. Without someone to carry you up, to be your door. The voice didn't respond, but I could feel it listening. I'll be your door, I said. Take me. Let the others go. All of them. Everyone you've been holding here. Let them go, and I'll bring you up. More silence. Then the voice, different now. Considering. You would do this? Give yourself to us if you let them go. All of them, including Angela. She's useful to us. Strong. I'm stronger, I said. And I'm offering. That has to count for something. Another pause. The longest yet. I stood there in the darkness, waiting, feeling them all around me, feeling the decision being made. Then, yes. The word echoed through the chamber, through the tunnel, through the earth itself. Yes. The deal was made. I felt them enter me. It's hard to describe. Like cold water filling your lungs, except it wasn't painful. Like a sound you feel in your bones, except it wasn't a sound. They came in through my eyes, my ears, my mouth, my skin. They filled every space inside me, every gap, every emptiness I didn't know was there. And I understood. They weren't evil, weren't malevolent. They were just old. Impossibly old. Older than the rocks they lived in. Older than the planet that formed around them. They had been here since the beginning, had watched life emerge and grow and spread across the surface, had felt the digging begin and the tunnels extend down into their world. They were curious. They were lonely. They had been alone in the dark for so long, and now they wanted to see what was above. They wanted to see the sun. I let them have me. Let them look through my eyes, hear through my ears, feel through my skin. I gave them what they wanted, and in return, they let go. I felt it happen. The others, the ones they had been holding. The lost miners, the missing people, the ones who had never come back up. They released them, all at once, like a breath being let out. Including Angela. I heard her gasp, heard her voice, her real voice, confused and frightened but alive. What? She said. Where? Get her out, I said. My voice sounded strange, layered, not just me anymore. Get everyone out. Now. Nystrom moved. I couldn't see him in the darkness, but I heard him, heard the others, movement, activity, the sound of people being gathered, being led. Sigrid, Carl's voice. What did you do? The only thing I could. Now go. Get them to the surface. I'm not leaving you here. You have to. This is the deal I made. They needed a door. I'm the door. A pause, then his hand on my arm, gripping tight. We'll come back for you. I know. He let go. I heard him move away, heard the others following. The shuffle of feet, the murmur of voices, the lost ones, finally going home. Then silence. I stood there in the darkness, full of something that wasn't me, waiting. Time passed, I don't know how much. Hours, maybe, or days. In the dark, without them, time doesn't mean much. Then the voice spoke. Inside me, but also outside. Everywhere. Are you ready? Yes, it's a long way up. I know. You might not survive. I know. A pause, then, something that might have been approval, or respect. You're strong. Stronger than we thought. Maybe you will survive. Maybe you'll bring us all the way. I started walking, up through the tunnels, through the darkness, through the miles of earth between the deep places and the surface. I couldn't see, but I didn't need to. They knew the way. They had been watching the miners for 100 years, learning the paths, the routes, the ways in and out. They guided me step by step through the labyrinth of the old mine. I walked for hours. My legs burned, my lungs ached, my body screamed for rest. But I kept going. Every step brought them closer to the surface. Every step fulfilled the deal I had made. Eventually, I saw light. Faint at first, just a lessening of the darkness. Then brighter, clearer. The glow of day filtering down through the tunnel ahead. The entrance, the way out. I stopped. They surged inside me. Eager, desperate, so close. After so long, so close to the sun. "Wait," I said. They stilled, confused. "I have questions first," I said. "Before I bring you up, we made a deal, and I'll honor it. But I need to understand. What will you do up there? What will you become?" Silence. Then, "We don't know. We've never been there. Never been in the light. Will you hurt people? We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to see, to feel, to be in the warmth after so long in the cold." I thought about that. About what I was about to do. About the consequences, the unknowns. "If you hurt anyone," I said, "I'll find a way to send you back. I don't know how, but I'll do it. That's my promise." A pause. Then, "We understand." "Good." I walked toward the light. I came out of the mine on a Saturday afternoon. The light was blinding. I had been in darkness so long that even the gray winter sky was too much to bear. I fell to my knees at the tunnel entrance. Eyes streaming, skin burning, the things inside me recoiling from the brightness. Then, slowly, they adjusted. They saw the sky. The clouds, the pale sun, the trees at the edge of the mine property. They felt the wind, the cold air, the space, the openness of the world above ground. And they were overwhelmed. I felt it, the awe, the joy, the sheer wonder of it. For billions of years they had been in the dark, in the deep places under the weight of the earth. Now they were seeing the surface for the first time. It was the most beautiful thing they had ever experienced. They didn't want to hurt anyone. I had been right about that. They just wanted to see, to feel, to exist in the light after so long in the darkness. I let them have it. Let them experience the world through me, all of it. The sights and sounds and sensations. I walked through the forest, drove into town, stood on the shore of the lake and watched the sun set. I gave them everything I could, and then, when they had seen enough, they left. I felt them go. It was like the cold water draining out, like the sound fading away. They flowed out of me and dissipated into the air, into the light, going wherever things like them go when they finally reach the surface. I don't know what they became. I don't know where they went, but I know they were grateful. I felt that right at the end. A sense of thanks, of acknowledgement, for the deal I had made, for the door I had been. Then they were gone, and I was alone. I collapsed at the edge of the lake. Lay there on the rocks, staring up at the sky, feeling my body again. Just my body. Just me. They found me there an hour later. Carl and Angela and a search team that had been looking for me since I didn't come out of the mine with the others. Angela had told them what happened, what I had done. She was okay, shaken, confused, with gaps in her memory she might never fill. But okay, herself again. They were all okay. All the people who had been held in the deep places, the ones who had been lost for years, decades. They came out of that mine changed, but alive. Most of them didn't remember what had happened to them. The time they had spent down there was just a blank, a gap in their lives. Maybe that was a mercy. I spent 3 days in the hospital, exhaustion, dehydration, minor injuries from the long walk through the tunnels. Nothing serious, nothing permanent. Except I was different. Not in any way I could explain or prove, just different. I could feel it. Something had changed inside me, in the place where they had been. An emptiness that wasn't quite empty. A door that was closed but not locked. I went back to work, filed my reports, answered the questions, tried to explain what had happened in ways that made sense to people who hadn't been there. Most of it went in the file as inconclusive. Strange occurrences, missing persons recovered, investigation closed. The signals stopped after that. No more voices on the radio, no more reports of strange transmissions. Whatever had been trying to communicate, it didn't need to anymore. It had found its way out. But I still go out to the mine sites sometimes. The Northland, the Spruce, the others. I stand at the edge of the pits and look down into the water, into the darkness. I don't know what I'm looking for. Closure, maybe. Understanding. Or maybe I'm just checking. Making sure the door stays closed. Edwin Torvald died last spring. Heart attack, quick and peaceful. At his funeral, his daughter gave me something he had wanted me to have. An old radio, a vintage tube model from the 50s. The kind the miners used to use. I keep it in my house, on a shelf in my living room. I don't plug it in, don't turn it on. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it. A faint hum, almost below the threshold of hearing. A whisper of static, like a signal trying to come through. I don't know what it means. Maybe nothing. Maybe just the residue of what happened, the echo of what I carried inside me for those hours in the mine. Or maybe it's them, checking in, letting me know they're still out there, somewhere, in the light they waited so long to see. I hope they found what they were looking for. I hope we all do. The Iron Range is quiet now. The old mines are still there, still abandoned, still full of their secrets. People still come to see them, to photograph the pits and explore the ruins. They don't know what's underneath. They don't know what was there. Maybe it's better that way. Some things shouldn't be known. Some doors shouldn't be opened. I learned that in the darkness under the earth. But I also learned something else. Sometimes you have to open the door anyway. Sometimes you have to let things out. Because keeping them in, keeping them trapped and forgotten, that doesn't make them go away. It just makes them wait. And they're patient. They've been waiting a long time. I think about that a lot. About the things we bury, the things we try to forget, the things we push down into the dark and hope will never come back up. They always come back up. Eventually, one way or another, they always come back. The sun is setting over the range as I write this. Long shadows stretching across the snow, the sky going pink and orange and purple. It's beautiful. It's always beautiful here, even in the harshest weather, even in the longest nights. But the beauty doesn't erase what's underneath. The mines, the tunnels, the deep places where things lived for billions of years before we came along. They're still there. They'll always be there. And sometimes, when the conditions are right, they send signals. I heard one last night, on the radio that Edwin gave me, the one I never plug in. A woman's voice, faint, distant, saying something I couldn't quite make out. I leaned closer, listening, trying to understand. And I heard it. Thank you. Then silence. I sat there for a long time looking at the radio, thinking about what it meant, about what had happened in the mines, about what I had done, about the deal I had made. I don't regret it, even now, even knowing everything I know, I don't regret it. Because some things need to come out of the darkness. Some things deserve to see the sun, even if they're strange, even if they're old, even if they're not like us at all. They waited so long. They were so patient. And in the end, all they wanted was to feel the light on their faces, to see the sky, to know what it was like to be above the earth instead of under it. I gave them that, and they gave me something back. I don't know what it is yet. That emptiness inside me, that door that isn't quite closed. Something is there, in the place where they used to be. Something new. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm not afraid. I've been in the darkness. I've felt what lives there, and I've come back out. Whatever's waiting for me now, I can handle it. I'm a deputy of the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department. I've worked the Iron Range for 14 years. I know this place. I know its secrets. And I know that no matter how deep you go, no matter how dark it gets, there's always a way back to the surface. There's always a way back to the light. You just have to find it. And sometimes, you have to become it yourself.